if you guys are down.
Are you recording?
Not yet, but all right, cool. Welcome everybody to the Real Sheebs podcast, a podcast for the community featuring the community. Today we have Chromatic and Moonlit Monkey, two very special guests. I want to welcome each of you to the show. Bienvenido. How are you guys doing?
Yeah, good.
Doing great. Glad to be here.
Awesome. Well, I'm really thankful that you guys took the time to visit with us. We've got a lot to talk about. There's been a lot of happenings within the community. Obviously, what's going on right now, very juicy. Half of the community has been Thanos snapped. I've coined that, by the way. It's the Thanos Doge snap, I'm calling it. And they're all gone. So I'm happy to open it up with theories.
Wait, do you want me to give mine or no?
No, you're the co-host. I need you to sit there and be quiet. I'm just kidding. Yeah, let's start with yours.
No, I was just kidding. I just think that a lot of people have multiple accounts. So at one point, Elon's basically figured out a way to tie things to people's phone numbers and email addresses, and it's connected multiple accounts. So I think that's one commonality that I notice among all the people that are blocked.
Okay. Moonlit,
Yeah, it makes sense.
formerly Dogenar. I said this to you earlier. I might call you Nar by accident. If I do, forgive me.
That's okay.
Moonlit, what's your theory?
Well, yeah, I don't know what they have in common, but I know a couple of days ago he said he'd get rid of bots. Musk said he'd get rid of bots, and yeah, obviously whatever he's doing is aggressive, and maybe it does tie into multiple accounts. I don't know.
Could. I would be banned if it was multiple accounts. I've got an old one that I just deactivated though, right before this.
I don't know. It's just a theory.
What do you think, Chrome?
That's weird, right? I mean, if I were the new owner of Twitter or a manager of people there or something like that, everything that they've done so far goes against, exactly opposite what I would do. So it's really hard to predict. The theories we've had are all plausible. I'll put down another one. There's a system somewhere that somebody who was laid off or quit was maintaining. Nobody knows where it is. Nobody knows exactly what it does, but it did its thing, and then this is what we see, right? There have got to be dozens of systems and services running that don't really have any primary maintainers now. And it wouldn't surprise me if we see lots of other weird stuff happening on Twitter in the coming weeks and probably months as people discover what is still running and is hooked up in ways that maybe nobody documented and nobody there anymore knows how it works. So I don't really think it's someone did something deliberate that was targeting specific people or anything like that. It's probably just unanticipated consequence of either something that nobody knew was running or somebody did something and didn't think about the consequences and knew about the consequences. That to me is the most plausible.
Interesting.
I would say so. We were chatting with Queen Satoshi before the show started, and she was saying that I'd asked if anyone noticed in any other communities if this was going on, and she said surprisingly it doesn't look like it. So it does appear to be mostly Doge. That's kind of strange. I wouldn't put us at the top of like the spammy list. I mean, we're up there, but I wouldn't put us up there with like Shibe or Bitcoin maxis.
You're just a conspiracy theorist. Just kidding.
Yeah, some months back there was a bunch of Doge people banned too, and that was kind of like, I don't know, like maybe there's some surface overlap between what a spam looks like and what a Doge account looks like.
Hold on a second. This same exact thing, this is almost to a T when this happened to my Nature Doge 69 account. on November. It was literally like November 4th. It might even be the exact date. I'd be able to find out. I'm not kidding you. The same thing happened 1 year ago,
Well,
and I
it
entered
was
in
December 4th.
my work phone number instead of my phone number that was linked to my account, and that's how it got locked out.
I doubt it.
It's interesting. Well, I know the time frame lines up.
No, the time frame lines up. I'm just saying. There's no like common denominator, right? With like the accounts that are being affected. It's really weird. I thought it was like verified only, but there's a bunch of verified people who haven't been suspended. Obviously, multiple accounts. We run real sheaves, so that's not the common denominator. I don't know. It's just weird. We'll see what happens. I mean, we don't have to. We don't have to theorize on this too much. But yeah, let's actually get to know our guest. So, Moonlit Monkey, you've been part of Doge as long as I can remember. So, why don't you tell us how long you've been? It's Moonlit. It's at MoonlitMonkey69 for those of you that are watching. Tell us, when you got onto Twitter, when you got into the Doge community, and what drew you in.
Yeah, I mean, it's I don't know. I guess it's not the most glamorous story. I had encountered cryptocurrency years ago, um, mostly through Minds.com, and I didn't really think about investing it at that point because I was buying some to use it, um, and so yeah, I completely skipped over like the fact that it might go up, and then last year, when the big rally happened, talk about that and AMC and all that in the news, and I discovered Dogecoin on Reddit. Yeah, discovered particularly on Twitter, which Twitter seems to be a bit more. They talk more about the details, um, and yeah, just dived headlong into it. And I talked to back then. I talked to some of the devs and got into discussions on the GitHub, and yeah.
So you're one of the few who got into Doge and started talking to devs right away.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
means
yeah. I was.
so far.
Sorry, what's that?
I said so far. This is episode 8. We've chatted with quite a few people, but you're one of the few who's come in and just hopped right into GitHub.
Yeah, I didn't know how to code or anything, but
Well,
yeah,
that
it
was gonna
was
be my next question. So, what drew you
very.
to GitHub if you didn't know how to code? Like, what were you putzing around on there, trying to break stuff?
No. I was just involved in discussions about the upcoming updates and possible scaling, and I got into the Discord and talked to some devs about their feelings because there's a range of views on that sort of stuff, and on the dev Reddit subreddit. So yeah, I was just getting my head around how it worked, and also like participating in discussions about like future stuff, even though I don't code. They shut all that stuff down, I think. Well, they separated it out into like a separate discussion area because there were too many people in there saying, "We want this dumb thing," and not really listening to anyone.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, the ETH bridge conversations have been going on for a long time, but there's like one post on our Dogecoin dev, one a month, once a week, maybe. That's like bringing that up from all different accounts. I found myself in there pretty early on, and when I first got into Doge, which was January of last year or December of 2020, I had got in and I hopped on that subreddit and about melted my brain. So I kind of fled away from that and moved on to the memes. So you stuck around in there. You just were determined to learn how things work.
Yeah, yeah. I'm mostly like talking to people on Reddit and also on here in Discord. Was able to get my head around sort of the basics of how everything works, and I mean, I still don't know enough to make a really educated opinion on things, but yeah, the technical side interests me for sure.
You inspire me to like want to get in there because that's the one thing that I feel like I can't really speak on a lot of issues because I can't really code, because I have more of a sales background with the payment side, so I don't really. Most people would think that we're just two different people, and those two worlds just kind of collide, but I don't understand it, but you make me want to learn how. So it's interesting to know that you can go in there and learn how to make a difference, or at least learn to navigate your way through conversation.
I mean, a lot of it was just being corrected by people who know what they're talking about.
Yeah, there's a lot of that, which is kind of good, right? I mean, it's like the anti-echo chamber of Twitter. Like you get a lot of one-off idiots on Twitter that will say something, and it's kind of a gut check, but it feels so trolly. Whereas Reddit, you say something that's just off the rails, they'll let you know, and you'll get humbled pretty quick because people like to they bring links, they bring receipts there a lot more. I've noticed anyway. So it's a good place to learn. What was your learning experience? Where would you put yourself now versus when you first got in? On a scale of 1 to 10, let's say you started at 0.
I don't know, maybe a 5. Like I got a good grasp on, I think, on the basic concepts, but not so much that I actually know how all the parts work precisely.
Okay.
Yeah, enough that I can sort of talk about it, I think.
Well, that's why we have Chromatic. So,
Thanks.
get ready to humble thyself in the sight of the Lord, family. So at chromatic_x, you are a core developer. You've been a developer for how long?
Developer of
Dogecoin
Dogecoin.
specifically. Sorry.
Yeah, I just checked, and first PR I submitted that was accepted was April 19th, 2021. So relatively recent. I guess it's about a year now.
Okay. All right. It feels like it would be longer to me, but all right. So you're a newbie. What are you doing? You're
That's
breaking
right. Very easy.
it. Okay, and so yeah, it's just so our audience knows, PR is not public whatever PR. It's a pull request. So that was your first
Yeah, that was the
submission.
first contribution I proposed to the Dogecoin core wallet.
What was your first proposal?
There was a stream of text. Yeah, so I'm deep in this, but there is a reference in the documentation for something called Bitcoin priv key as an argument to something called import priv key. And I said, well, that's silly. Why should the documentation give Bitcoin any credit? This is Dogecoin doing it. So it was a very small typo change, I would say. But that's the easiest way to get started, right? I mean, if anybody's listening to this and thinking, wow, I need to have a really good math background, I don't. I need to have a really good C++ background, I'm okay. You can just go and see something that looks weird or wrong or strange in the documentation or in text in the core itself. And you can make a single word change, and that's still a very valuable contribution we're very, very glad to have. And that's a great way to get started. And if that's all you ever do, that's wonderful. We appreciate it. That's what I did to start, because my theory is any contribution that is a positive contribution is a contribution worth considering. So, I'll often see on GitHub other places, I'll be using code or reading code or something like that. I'll see a typo or a change I can make that takes, I don't know, 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes to make it and submit it. And if somebody accepts it, great, that's wonderful. We're all the better for it. And if somebody rejects it, okay, I tried to make the world a little better place, and maybe someone else will pick it up and do something different later. right? It's still a suggestion, still a contribution. So that was my first contribution, and then there have been a few since then.
So let me ask you this: is there a possibility that developers who are very advanced, uh, possibly, no offense, uh, oversimplify things when it comes to pull requests like that? So it's very simple, but do you have to download download GitHub, download the GitHub client, pull the entire repo onto your drive, make the edit, push that to your account, and then issue a pull request? Or is there a simpler way to go about it where you can just go on
Yeah.
GitHub and make those types of changes?
Yeah, if you go on GitHub yourself, there are some ways you can make the change. If you have an account on GitHub, you can make the change on like a web client on the desktop from your web browser. And for things like a typo fix or a little change, or rewording a sentence in documentation or something like that, that works great. I've done that because, I'm an experienced developer, but I'm also very lazy, which makes me a good developer sometimes, I think. And I don't necessarily want to do all the steps to it, like downloading everything, making a change, pushing it up. So yeah, the nice thing about GitHub is that it does allow you to make your own copy without downloading a thing to your computer and make that change and submit it to the main project. So there are ways to do that. It's probably too detailed to go into here, but it can be a lot simpler than it sounds like it might have to be. So that's a good thing.
Okay. So I'm on the GitHub. I'm sharing my screen, which by the way you should be able to see. This is where people. Um, okay, you know what? I might be jumping ahead because I want to actually jump into this and talk a little bit about your 101 stuff. So
Yeah.
let's take a step back from the GitHub experience for a newbie user. Let's keep getting to know Chromatic. So you made your first pull request, obviously, which was what you said June of last year. But
Yeah.
when did you get into Dogecoin specifically? When did you get into developing? And then what drew you to Dogecoin in general?
All right. Well, I just checked this, and in 2014, yeah, February 1st, 2014, somebody gave me a really big Dogecoin tip. And my theory is I said something smart or funny or insightful or at least attention getting on Reddit, and somebody gave me a tip. So this was, 8.5 years ago. And then, as they say in the movie Airplane, for a long time, nothing happened. But, it's been a long pandemic. I was looking around for something to do, looking for an interesting hobby or something like that. And I thought, oh, I've got this Dogecoin that's been sitting around. Let me just dust off my old node and pull it up and update it. And lo and behold, like I said, I was looking through the docs. I saw a change I could make. I made a change, and it sort of spiraled out from there. It was nothing planned. It's just, oh, this seems interesting. This could be fun. This could be useful. Why not? That's a theory I have. Do things that are interesting.
That's cool. I think that's a common thread whenever I talk to a developer. It's the whole anyone can contribute, and I think people feel still intimidated by it, getting in, because most people don't have technical backgrounds, and a lot of people got into Dogecoin because it got hyped a lot. It got on the news. People were like, "What is this?" It was their onboard onto crypto. The same old
Mm-hmm.
story. So they're still very intimidated by it. But it's it's interesting that most developers say, "Hey, I mean, anyone can do it." Um, and I think with my aha moment with that was the most recent language update. I saw people from all walks of life contributing to the language update. That was
Yeah,
dope.
the translations.
Yeah. So
Yeah, and
that's
that was
awesome.
deliberate, very, very deliberate, right? Because what we're trying to do is exactly that, to say that any contribution, even if you feel like it's simple, even if you feel like it's silly, even if you feel you're not sure you have the skills, there are many, many people who know things, who have ideas, who can do small things that have a big effect, right? I think about, bringing a new translation, and however many people speak that language, it could be hundreds, it could be thousands, it could be millions of people. You've now done something that multiplies the effect of your work to that many people. And that to me is really amazing. That's something that's impressive. I think that's something we should celebrate. So yeah, I'm like you. I saw that energy that went into providing more translations, and it was really great to see, because that's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to make something that everybody feels a little bit of ownership in, and everybody feels like they can contribute to it in some way if they want, based on their skills, their ability, their time, their interest, all of it.
That is why I'm really excited for. I'm gonna plug it again. Pat's
Oh God.
very dot engineer. Open source ideating. I see it as a Y Combinator public version.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to see I want to see that kind of energy from the broader community. So that's awesome. So
Cool. Reminds me of the nodes, the old node thing back in the day. It was just like, just let them run their nodes.
right.
Like it's a contribution,
Hey,
and that means
here's a question for you off the top of the head, Chromatic, and Moonlit, if you know, how does voting work on your node? There's chatter about if a node is a vote, and your participation in Dogecoin, you have a say in where Dogecoin goes. Obviously, the hot topic I think surrounded around that when it came up was proof of stake, right? So
Right.
if someone were to fork and be like, all right, we want to move everything over to this new fork or whatever, you can vote with your node if you want to, I don't know, convert. Maybe I'm sounding really stupid, by the way, but
No, right.
how does the voting mechanism work?
You want to take that, Moonlit?
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, basically, a node or a node running on a miner can choose what version of or what software they want to run. Some miners actually run custom versions of core, I think. So you sort of vote on the version of the software you want by putting that version of the software on. So the nodes relay the information throughout the network. So if you have a bunch of nodes that have chosen one thing, then that network's going to relay the blockchain better than the one that people didn't vote on or less people voted on.
All right, Chromatic, fact check them.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And there were some other things too, right? As we've been developing the last several versions in the 1.14 series, we've been trying to make various changes to things that people who are running nodes, people who are running miners can configure. Like, how much dust should you be able to keep? What are you charged for transaction costs and things like that? We'll provide defaults, we'll make suggestions, but ultimately by making these things that anybody who's running a node can configure, that means if the community, the majority of nodes say we believe that transaction fees should be, X, and the default is Y, well, the network has voted in that sense. The network prefers X instead of Y, and that's totally fine, right? The idea there is, instead of a small group of people deciding what Dogecoin is, how it works, all these pieces, it's more important that we give everybody who participates in it the ability to say, I prefer to go in this direction. And it's going to take convincing the majority of nodes, the majority of people invested in this, one way or another. It's reducing the idea of a central control over what Dogecoin is, how the network works, and things like that. And it could be as simple as saying, if everybody decides that the upcoming 1.14.7 release just isn't that great, they won't upgrade their nodes to it. And there's not a lot the developers can do other than, try to make a better release after that. Now, I do hope people upgrade because I think it'll be a great release, but it's not up to me. My job is to make sure that this is good software. My job is not to force everybody to upgrade.
So, and I'm joking about the fact check thing, by the way.
No,
Moonlit, by the way, that puts you at a 6. You're not a 5. You son of a biscuit. So with with these nodes, right? These I've pulled up on my screen. Hopefully, you guys can see it. I'm sharing it on Discord. I've pulled up the Node Explorer on Blockchair, and this one has the counts, right? This is the popular screenshot when we see the tweets flying that say, "Hey, everybody, don't forget, update your nodes," right? And it's an update. Now, the update from 1.14.5 to 1.1.4, blah, 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 from 5 to 6, 3, 5, and 6, right? A lot of the chatter was behind the scenes around the dusting limits, and a lot of the chatter was for transaction fees, right? So I was very encouraged on Twitter, hey, update your node because you can send a transaction for 0.01 Doge instead of, what was it, 1 before, or 4? And
I remember exactly right.
yeah, and so that was a big push. But in effect, was that making me say, all right, I'm actually voting for this version because I'm updating it?
It's a metaphor. Yeah, that's essentially how I see it, and we use that as a metaphor.
Okay.
Right? You are deciding as an individual participating in a network how you want the network to behave.
So if some rando comes out with a 1.15 and they fork it effectively, and I download that, I'm voting for that.
Right.
So that's how you cast your vote.
Yeah.
Interesting. I mean, I'm not afraid to sound stupid. I literally thought there was some kind of voting mechanism. Like,
I mean, let's be fair here, Jimmy.
I'm chief
Let's be fair.
officer.
Be fair here. I mean, you did regurgitate a lot of the stupidity that I have been given to you privately. So, because this has been something that I've been saying with you privately, I was like, it's a vote. It's a vote if you want to go one direction or the other, and it means something. And there's a long story behind that with the old node and the Billy Satan thing. That was a funny time.
This puts a
Yeah.
lot of
So the
that into perspective, doesn't it? Go
Yeah.
ahead, Chrome.
I was going to say the technical term for people who want to look up things like this is consensus protocol. There's a whole lot of interesting math and philosophy behind how these systems are supposed to work like that. But I think voting is the metaphor, the image we use that sort of describes it in a way that's probably more accessible to people than saying this is really based on solving something like the Byzantine generals, which is, as it sounds, kind of a Byzantine question.
Okay. That's really helpful for me, especially. Like I said, I thought there was some kind of mechanism involved. So I might vote for the 1.14.6 Misha Bor node version. No, so is this someone putting their own IP in and it just looks like that? No, because there's 7 on here. There's a count of 7.
I think you can just name your node whatever you like.
You can add that UA comment, yeah, whatever you like. I do know Misha has a few nodes running, or has at certain points. Or Misha could have imposters at this point. That would be amazing. Yeah.
What a boss if he's got 7 nodes. That's crazy.
Yeah. Imagine that. Like that's something Misha Bor would do, right? He would not be running a mining operation. He's just running nodes, just validating.
Yeah, one on each. I would not put this past our friend.
Yeah. He's got one for every cannoli that he had. One per cannoli per day. So he has 7
Yeah.
per day, so that makes sense. The
There you
math
go.
checks out. That's super
And what-
helpful.
Canoodles?
Was that?
Canoodles?
Canoodles. Okay, so let's see here. You had got in. You'd begun coding for a while. Obviously, you're working on the latest release. Tell us a little bit about what's in store in that one, in the newest version. You said what? It's 1.14.7.
0.7, yeah. Yeah, I'd say there are a handful of things. A lot of spit and polish as the idiom goes, right? But there are some, I think, larger updates you want to get in place. Some of them are going to be updates to important libraries that Dogecoin relies on. There are some user interface improvements I want to get in place, not just ability for people running nodes to make more improvements based on like the RPC commands and things like that. I want to put some of these in the user interface for the core wallet as well. But I think really the biggest thing is, Pat and I have talked about this quite a bit off and on. We want to get on more of a regular release schedule where we can say we know that every, I don't know, maybe 6 months or something like that, there's going to be a new release, and we should encourage people to get on that. Because if you look at the Node version Explorer, there are still people on older versions, and there are good reasons why we want people to get on newer versions. Not just because dust limits have changed, transaction costs are smaller, but because there's some pieces of code we can just get rid of that are legacy to support older versions, or pieces of code that we've improved them quite a bit and we don't like working on them anymore, so we want to replace them or rewrite them. There's benefits to that. But I mean, also, if you think about security and things like that, we had several security improvements just based on reading code and saying, this isn't really a great idea, let's rewrite this before something goes wrong here. There are some big improvements we made in 1.14.6. I'm sort of getting off the topic here, but I think really the big improvements are coming in the 1.21 release because we can pull in a lot more features from upstream. But you're just going to see a lot of small quality of life improvements. Probably nothing dramatic that you're going to look at and say, I have to rush out and update now. But maybe 10 or 20 small things you look at and say, okay, on the whole, this is either a problem I'm not going to run into again, or here's a new feature or improvement to a feature I hadn't thought about, but it makes my life just a little bit much easier. I think that's what I'm most looking forward to, is nothing that makes you sit up and go, oh my goodness, I couldn't live without this, but more like, yeah, this is just getting better all the time, and I can reliably rely on it getting better all the time.
Okay.
How's is it from a manpower perspective? Are you guys looking for more help? I mean, it's something
Absolutely.
that somebody like me that you could teach how to do a pull request. I mean, there's times
Absolutely.
that I'm sitting around bored just playing Call of Duty, but I'm getting to be 40. So, I mean, Queen's already trying to take my Xbox and throw it out the window. So,
He might as well do something with his life.
Yeah, we could always use more contributors. Whether that's looking at just filing a bug, fixing some text, doing a translation. There are even bits where downloading the source code, if you're comfortable downloading the source code, compiling it, running some tests yourself, would be a really big help, because the more eyeballs we have on these things, the easier it is sometimes. Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, always lots of ways to have somebody who wants to make like a 5-minute contribution or a 2 or 3 hour contribution. And it doesn't have to be a long-term commitment either. Right. If this is something you're looking at and saying, I've got some time over the holiday break, I'm willing to try this out for an afternoon or something like that, and that's all you ever do, that's wonderful. That's super helpful. I really encourage that. So happy to help, and happy to have people volunteer to help and look at cases out.
Cool.
So, if you have a non-custodial wallet, let's say MyDoge, for example, um, what node version are you supporting when you do that? Or are you even, is it even related at all? Like, let's say you never even downloaded Core and you went
Right.
entirely on Robinhood, Coinbase, Crypto.com, uh, or MyDoge or SoDoge Tip. Like, what exactly what's your player in this whole conversation?
Like from a voting perspective, is the
Not
metaphor we're
necessarily
using
from
here?
yeah, sure, from a voting perspective. Now that we've cleared up what voting means.
Yeah. Well, that's a great question. It depends on who's running. I guess it depends on two things, right? I mean, some of it is just what's the network overall, what's the majority of the network believe, or what's the majority of the network support. Some of it is also, if you're going through an exchange that is on like an older version that has a higher transaction cost, if you try to make a transaction and you're going through their nodes to make that transaction, you're not going to get the lower cost, you're going to get the higher cost because their nodes don't understand that. That's why there was a push after we released that earlier version for exchanges and other providers to update the version of their nodes to support these lower transaction costs.
Right.
So in one sense, it's out of your hands in the same way that your coins are out of your hands. And in another sense, you're also relying on the network as a whole. But if let's say let's make up an exchange. There's probably a stupid exchange by this name. Let's call it Gamma Exchange or something like that, right?
Oh wait,
If
Gamma's
you-
a rug pull. Be careful. No,
yeah,
I'm just kidding.
exactly.
I'm kidding.
This isn't a thing that actually exists. If it does, I'll pick a different Greek letter. But let's say there's an exchange called Gamma Exchange, and let's say they set the transaction cost to 0.0001, right? Just a tiny transaction cost. And you look at that and say, that's great. Well, probably most of the other nodes in the network aren't going to broadcast and process those transactions because they're beneath the transaction. And so there's a chance that, because it's well off of the consensus of the network, those transactions won't get picked up and confirmed anywhere, right? So I think what I'm probably recapitulating is there's risk in letting someone else decide this for you, but there's also benefits in letting someone else manage some of these things for you. So it's a mixed bag. I just want people to go into this with their eyes open.
Hmm.
Can I jump in on this?
Yeah, of
Yeah.
course.
Fact check.
So one of the discussions I've had with Patrick was just about how a lot of the legacy wallets and some of the exchanges using smart fees and treating Dogecoin as a fee economy, like Bitcoin and Ethereum are. And sometimes that can push up the fees really high. And some of them also don't use the new minimum fees or the recommended fees. So yeah, in a sense, the wallets having, like the wallet you use or the exchange you use, is having some effect on the network. Not to the degree that nodes do, but at least in terms of things like fee setting and conventions operating at a time. And yeah, in a lot of cases, it'll be good for those to change. So people use the minimum fees or use if they're going to try and for the smart fees, it's like that's like you trying to set a higher price on your fees so that you can get a quicker inclusion on the block when the blocks are full, which happens almost never. Occasionally it happened, like it happened the other year when Binance did that big screw up and they moved all their Doge at once and filled up all the meme pool. But most of the time that doesn't matter. So like them operating in that way by default is like pushing the average fee that users are getting charged up.
Hmm. So I can see this as like an additional push to get off of exchanges. Um, it's very hard though for there's been a lot of conversations about floating on Twitter about onboarding and offboarding crypto. Obviously, Kevo was on our podcast last episode, and he made this funny rant about how difficult it is to explain getting into Dogecoin to your average Joe Schmo. And so obviously he goes in this like 30-second, you gotta get on an exchange, you gotta blah blah blah, and it's very funny. I love how he delivers it, but there's a lot of truth and reality to it, right? It's very complicated. If you want to get Doge and then pull it off of an exchange, that's not easy to do because you have to go through an exchange if you want to buy it with fiat, right? Is there
Right.
is there any potential to be able to handle more of this outside of exchanges? Or is it a necessary evil?
Yes, I mean, something I've talked about for a while now is Thorchain, where you can use you can decentralized exchange like stablecoins and other cryptos with Doge. And some of those do have on ramps and off ramps. There's like little on ramp and off ramp services that some of the wallets use. But most new users are not going to get in that way, because then you've got to start out with like, oh, I'm responsible for my private key and my public key, my password, my key phrase or whatever. And I've got to like, write that down in a way and perhaps store it in separate locations so that someone doesn't rob me for my crypto key. It's all that kind of like I'm a new person and I've got to figure that stuff out. And so probably people are going to start on exchanges no matter what you do, because it's a step up in responsibility.
Yeah, God forbid you have to remember your social security and password into your own bank.
Oh yeah, but if you lose it and it's a bank, then someone will get it back for you because it's a centralized provider.
That's
But if you lose it and it's your key, it's like it is your responsibility. So that is a shift.
right. You're putting your
You are
cash in
not
your
fit to
mattress.
own a bank.
Right. I'm not even responsible with $10.
Yeah, true. We got $50 or $10 or something now. It's a big deal.
Interesting. What's your take,
Yeah.
Chromatic? Exchanges. I mean, necessary evil.
I don't know if I'd say evil in general.
Colloquial.
Yeah, colloquially evil, like chaotic evil or something like that.
Exactly.
Yeah, somebody should do a Dungeons and Dragons alignment chart for various crypto-related activities and entities. That would be
Yeah.
really interesting.
That would make so like exchanges would be lawful evil.
I'm not sure about that anymore.
No. Yeah. I'm trying to think two polar opposites.
Exactly. Well, I mean, here's the thing I think about exchanges. There are multiple activities they could be doing, but if you look at like some of the financial regulations in the United States, like Glass-Steagall or Sarbanes-Oxley or things like that, that tried to separate the normal activities of a bank. I promise I'm going somewhere with this. Separate the normal activities of a bank, making loans, holding funds, and things like that, from investment activities of a bank, which is, more speculative, more derivatives, trading, things like that. It would be nice if we had some way of separating those features of exchanges, because to make an exchange work where I can go with, let's say, 100 Canadian dollars and buy 100 Canadian dollars worth of Dogecoin, they're going to need to be able to process that transaction. They're going to have to hold enough Dogecoin that they can transfer it to me, and they're going to need to be able to hold enough Canadian dollars that they can do whatever they want to do with that. Similarly, if someone wants to sell 100 Canadian dollars worth of Dogecoin and they want to get 100 Canadian dollars back, the exchange is going to have to handle that transaction. So there are going to have to be things like reserves. They're going to have access to the correct number of fiat, the correct amount of fiat currency, the correct number of Dogecoin, things like that. So there are big capital reserves that an exchange is going to have to do. That's going to be the case. And I think there are only certain entities of specific sizes that can do that. Most individuals can't do that, which is why most people don't own their own banks. But if you look at other things, if you look at like some of the wild stuff FTX was doing, not to jump ahead, but looking at this and saying we've got these capital reserves using a fractional reserve banking model, we're only going to need to be able to access like 10 or 5 or 20% of that at a specific time. That gives us all these other billions of dollars we can play with and see if we can generate more money for ourselves in that. That's the activity we're starting to think exchanges might be towards the chaotic evil side. And again, right, I haven't seen the alignment chart I'm imagining in my head, but I think when you put those two activities together in a cryptocurrency sense or in a traditional banking sense, you've got these conflicts of interest that are going to be tricky. Now, I'll jump on this also as well. If you have an exchange that charges exorbitant on-ramp or off-ramp fees, that's getting pretty close towards lawful evil territory for me as well. So again, it's not nearly as black and white as you might think. There are shades of evil here when we talk about exchanges and shades of necessary. And I'm not sure they're parallel lines, but they don't always intersect either.
Interesting.
That's a very good point about the separation of those two things. You know, if you put loans and leverage and all these speculative instruments into an exchange, that's where you get all the risk. If you had an exchange that was just for buying and selling crypto, and they proved all of their funds, you could trust it.
Yep.
Right.
You could trust it more because it's performing more of a clearinghouse function rather than having, you know, long calls that might get called at inopportune times, you know, especially on financial instruments that have a lot of volatility. That's where the big risk is, right? And having the risk for something that does need to have some capital requirements is where it feels like a lot of these things in the past couple of years have gotten really, really long. At least to me.
Which is part of Misha's message, right? Is get it off of the exchange for those reasons, right?
Right.
Because you're using your own money against you 90% of the time. It seems like that's kind of like how exchanges would evolve. Even if you decided to start this magical exchange that everyone envisions, which is like this one is only meant for exchanging and nothing else. And that's probably how a lot of them start. And then they're like, wait a minute, the financial world has so many holes that we can make more money. And so they leverage every one of those whenever they get an opportunity, which is why I would ask this. So I am also a little bit of a silver bug. I know that's not allowed in the Doge community, but I do have hard silver. And if you want to exchange that, you go to, you know, you list it and you sell it physical, not paper. And you can sell it to an individual. Is there ever any room for a marketplace for something like that where you're basically saying, hey, do you want 100 Doge? I'll sell it to you for XYZ, and it's from you to me. And you can pay me USD, but I'll send it to you, and we don't even have to go through an exchange. Is there any capability for something like that? Or is this so beyond that realm now?
There are some things like that for Bitcoin. There's a decentralized exchange called BISC that operates on the Tor network, and people trade Bitcoin with each other using this software, and they like send cash to each other in various complicated ways, maybe even cash in an envelope or something dumb. And there's also a thing called local Bitcoins, although that's mostly like individuals selling kind of larger amounts of Bitcoin to people. There are some things like that for Bitcoin.
Anything like that exists for Dogecoin?
Not that I know of.
Would it be a bad idea? Would that be purely Silk Road stuff, or?
There are risks. There are real benefits to it too, right? I mean, you'd have to really understand your appetite for risk. You know, if I decided to meet up with someone downtown and say, here's $100 US, give me $100 worth of Dogecoin at this price. Are my dollars counterfeit? Does this other person have the Dogecoin? Can they submit a transaction, then yank it out of the mempool? I like mempool better. That sounds cooler. Can they yank it out of the memory pool before it gets settled? Anything like that, right? There's a certain amount of trust I have to have another person to do this, and I think my suspicion is these other exchanges are person-to-person exchanges, peer-to-peer exchanges, perhaps, are going to need to have some of these controls back in place. Right? You're going to want to have somebody arbitrate this transaction to make sure that both things get submitted at the same time, that they are valid and they're released at the same time. You know, but again, your appetite for risk is your appetite for risk. If meeting somebody for Craigslist, you know, downtown at noon with lots of other people around, handing them $100 bill and hoping to get $100 worth of Dogecoin out of it is your appetite for risk. Please understand that. Make your own decisions. Make your wise decisions.
Right.
but be aware that there are lots of ways that these types of transactions can go wrong. And there are a lot of systems that have evolved over many, many years that people have put in other mechanisms. Just because it's crypto doesn't mean that everything is always trustworthy from the start, as I think we've all realized by now, hopefully.
Well, it's so. One thing too, I was thinking about when to Misha's point is once people start taking their money off of these exchanges, then these exchanges, if they're spending other people's money, well, then if they don't have any money, how are they going to build the reserves? Like it flips it on their head. It makes them more of an institutional buyer. Now you force them to come back in and buy and put that money in the reserves, but it sounds like they didn't account for any of that volatility or any of that that market risk, I guess, internally in some of these exchanges.
I can't remember whether it's Charlie Munger. I think it might be, or Warren Buffett. There's a great quote that says, "When the tide goes out, you can see who's been swimming naked."
Yeah, it's interesting.
That was Herbie Hancock.
Good to know.
Herbie Hancock. All right, look, we could certainly talk about this till the tide goes out. But we got a lot of other stuff to chat about here. You talked a little bit about Twitter, and obviously with the exchanges and so forth. What would you, either of you, how would you see Twitter's integration with Dogecoin look? One at a time. No, one at a time. One at a time. Not all at the same time. Not all at once. Yeah, Moonlit. I'll ask you first. How do you envision it?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to see it be a self-custody crypto wallet that interacts with a custody wallet, and then so you've got like both options, and then the custody wallet and the fiat side can be used for payments. I don't really see how. I don't know. Like it could just all be self-custody. But I'm just thinking, what's that going to look like for the Dogecoin network if suddenly there's X number of Dogecoin transactions flying around on Twitter? So I don't know.
Do you see it being problematic, Moonlit?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think the network is supposed to be able to handle about 50 times more traffic than it has at peak. So it might not be. But it's just like, oh, well, there's a whole bunch of extra traffic if it was all self-custody, and I don't know how much that is. So yeah, it might not be a problem, but conceivably also could be a problem.
Chromatic?
If I were in charge of this for Twitter, I would probably not do a lot of these transactions on chain, assuming that they're going to be person-to-person transactions. I'd probably do some sort of roll up or level 2 solution or something like that, right? Where in this sense, Twitter is more of a clearinghouse for these transactions. And it's just some sort of back end moving a few bits around in a database rather than having on-chain transactions. Just because it's going to be faster, safer if all of these are in network. I don't have to wait a minute for a transaction to settle, or up to 6 or 10 minutes, whatever your appetite for risk is, for enough block confirmations to be sure that the transaction has happened. Right? If all these transactions are happening within the Twitter ecosystem, the benefit of the chain, I avoid the double spend problem. I know exactly the provenance of these funds. That's not necessarily so important. Now, that's not necessarily good for Twitter users, because now we're talking about Twitter acting as an exchange or a custodian in this sense, which is something that does bring its own risks. But it could also be a lot faster than waiting for the chain to do this, and it wouldn't necessarily introduce the type of scaling issues that I'd be worried about as a core developer, right? I mean, we're going to have to deal with these scaling issues at some point. We're going to have to deal with the number of transactions. That can happen in a single second at some point. We're going to have to deal with storage sizes at some point. If it becomes terabytes of space to host the entire blockchain, that means that a lot of devices, a lot of people don't have the resources to host nodes anymore. That's going to be a big problem. So there are things that I hope if Twitter does certain things, it doesn't make that job harder and faster. On the other hand, the balance is I would prefer a decentralized solution that puts more power in the hands of sheaves. Now, I'll put on my magic prediction hat for a second and say, if you want to know how a system already does something like this, look at the WeChat app that's come out of China and look at all the integrations there. Because my suspicion is when somebody talks about X, the everything app, that somebody's thinking very, very much of what China already has and has had for, I don't know, 10, 11 years now.
He brought that up yesterday in the Twitter space when I was in there. It was interesting. One of the guys had brought up WeChat, and he said that they're looking into that currently of tying WeChat to Twitter payments and crypto payments. And he said tying all that together is a no-brainer. Goes straight out of the horse's mouth.
WeChat has worked really well in China and Chinese markets for various reasons. I don't know how much of those are related to like mobile development or the adoption of mobile devices, mobile internet in those countries versus other countries like North America or other countries like countries in North America or Northern Europe, places like that. So it's not to me a slam dunk this would work, but it's a successful system that already works. And so I would think anybody who's trying to develop this could be looking at that and thinking about what's worked, what doesn't work there, technically at least.
Yeah, I think I agree with you that like the interim solution that makes the most sense is definitely custodial solution. But obviously that's not what you ideally want. But in terms of like fixing potential problems that might come up, like how big the blockchain is and how much nodes have to store, and whether it can scale to that size and everything, that's probably going to take core development of what to do, right? So you don't really want that to happen tomorrow.
No.
Yeah, so we're not ready.
We are. So that's the point. You've been hearing that a lot lately. Scalability, security. Jimmy, you put a post out with the poll, and it was like, what do you feel like is the most important? And scaling and security were the least selected across the board in the community.
Yeah, I guess people and they don't really understand how things work.
Yeah. But to Jimmy's point, we're not ready. We're not ready for Doge to be at $1 or McDonald's to take us on. That's what you're saying.
I wouldn't necessarily say that. I'm just saying, like, as far as all of it being handled on chain, yeah, we've got a while to go.
So what would a layer 2 look like? Explain layer 2 to me like I'm 5. Actually, explain it to me like I'm Jimmy and I'm a freaking idiot.
Which one of us?
Either of you. I mean, I have no idea. I know Bitcoin has Lightning, and I think that's layer 2, and it validates transactions faster, but it's not actually on chain, right? It's almost like a proxy validation. Is that right? Or
Yeah, it is like a proxy validation that eventually settles on the main layer, and you've got to like switch your coins between the two to use it, and that's more or less how most layer 2s work. Patrick has talked about a layer 1.5 as a possible solution, similar to what Dash uses, which is where you kind of have validation for both. And like they have a thing called FastPay network or whatever, and the nodes handle that other than the miners. And you just select that you want to use that particular thing, the FastPay network, when you send the transaction, rather than the cash amount. So it's kind of more integrated into the base layer.
so would a layer 2 be almost like an entirely separate blockchain, and it's just validating stuff faster, and then that's getting sent back to the core. Is that how that would work? Or
Yeah, kind of. I wouldn't say it's necessarily always a blockchain, but it's like it's like a separate network that has its own method of securing the transactions, and then it comes back to the layer one to settle eventually.
Yeah, let's say it's a different ledger necessarily than a different blockchain. You know, because a blockchain is a ledger, but not everything that's a ledger is a blockchain.
oh god, I've gotten cross-eyed.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So
Okay,
think about it like
let me ask you it this way. Let me spit it back to you. You tell me if it's fire. No,
I'm
tell me if I'm right about this. Is credit card layer 2, and my
yes,
bank account is core.
yes, that thing.
Okay.
That's exactly it.
And then
A bank account takes days to transfer the actual money, and the Visa network is like settling it faster
Yep.
system and waiting for that money to So it's not exactly the same, but that's the concept.
It's exactly the same, audience. You heard it.
Well, it's kind of like pending, right? You run a card, right? So you run your card, and you notice in your account when you check your balance that your amount that you can use available is different, right? It's pending. It hasn't actually gone through, but it shows you two different balances. That transaction hasn't settled yet, and then it has to ping, and then it has to ping back to the merchant, and it's a lot of hands in the pot, man. You mentioned the Visa and the card brands and the banks and the processors. There's so many people that are in there in between.
I'm taking your money, yeah. There's a lot of them. Everyone's got their hand out.
So the goal with 1.5 layer would be to mitigate some of that money suck, but still allow for really fast, high volume transactions happening without turning your node into 2 terabytes and just making it so you can't run a node, the average person. Is that right?
Yeah, I can't speak to the size thing because I guess that depends on how it's done in terms of
Right.
the size of the blockchain. But
Would it be possible to do that?
in general, the idea with the 1.5 is that they communicate better, the two layers. They're more together.
Okay. So we're getting there. We're getting there. So it feels a little bit pipe dreamy right now to be like, hey, you know, Elon's working at Twitter now, and soon there's gonna be a little button where you can tip Real Sheep's podcast and Doge right there on the spot.
In my mind, I'd hope to think that regulation comes first.
Yeah.
They do that stuff with like a custodial solution. You know, if they're holding on to the Doge, they could totally do all that stuff. The same with like McDonald's could use BitPay or whatever. Like there's the Verifone deal coming through. So for now the custodial solutions can certainly scale to that size. But as far as like a real decentralized solution, no, there for the full shebang.
Interesting. Man, I could just keep going and going because I'm like sucking in as much knowledge as I can. But I also know that Chromatic, you're limited on time, so I want to be cognizant of that. Do
Sure.
you have time to chat about this SBF situation?
Well, hold on.
Oh,
Can we ask him about that? Yeah, can we ask him about like the Litecoin? Because with the whole Lucky Coin fork and all that back in the day, it feels like maybe we're at a time where we're in another scaling
yeah.
scenario. I feel like a lot of people have been tweeting about the Doge and Litecoin relationship lately, and how Litecoin kind of saved us with the majority hash rate.
Right.
Like, I feel like that's very important because here we are. What is it? How many years later now? Is that 8?
7 or 8, I think. Yeah, I wasn't around, but yeah, from what I understand, it's something exactly like what you said.
So people are chatting about it a lot more now. There's a lot of throwback to Litecoin. What's the history behind the Litecoin side of things and Dogecoin relationship? What is the history behind that?
I
Chromatic.
can't speak too much, but first there was Bitcoin, and then there was, I forget which order this is, Lucky Coin, and then Litecoin, or Litecoin, then Lucky Coin. And then Dogecoin is a fork of one of those, which is a fork of the other of those, which is a fork of Bitcoin. So when you think about where did the original source code come from, it comes from all those spots. And so a lot of people have had their hands on that. A lot of people have looked at that. A lot of people have proposed solutions for one coin versus another, and they're all sort of merging together in some ways. The interesting thing I think you're alluding to is, can we share mining with Litecoin? And for the past several years, the answer has been yes, and that's been a huge deal because the more miners you have, the more blocks you're able to mine in a second, or more hashes you can process in a second. I'm getting deep here, but trust me, I'm going somewhere with this. The more processing power you can have for evaluating a proof of work coin like a Bitcoin or a Litecoin or Dogecoin, the more resilient you are to any one bad actor trying to take over the entire network.
Yep.
Right.
And so, when we had merge mining first show up, we could take advantage of all these folks mining Litecoin because we're using a very similar mechanism. And I'm hedging my bet just a little bit there by very similar. People in the know will say, well, it's exactly the same. It is in some ways, yes. We're using a very similar mechanism to validate transactions to mine blocks. And now we can use another network to, take advantage of all those miners that are working on Litecoin to preserve the integrity of the Dogecoin network and make sure that no one malicious actor can really take over the network. And those folks mining Litecoin are also getting Dogecoin rewards, and vice versa, right? It's symbiotic is probably the wrong word, but it's a mutually beneficial relationship. And part of that is because the provenance of the source code all traces back to the original Bitcoin source code. They're still compatible in these very important ways.
Still
So
feel like
Litecoin,
a little bit imbalanced. When you say a little, I mean, because Dogecoin, I mean, really was just a tipping meme coin, really at that time, and now here we are with all these different apps. You can drop My Doge or all the other things that are going on to be able to handle the capacity and the popularity that we're at now. I'd say Doge is probably the bigger beneficiary of the two from it.
It benefits both.
Yeah.
I hear Litecoin people talk about this quite a lot because Litecoin has the same problem that Bitcoin has, where one day their mining subsidy is going to just disappear. It's going to stop. And people have no reason at all to do it other than fees, which is a dumb solution Bitcoin has.
Mm-hmm.
Litecoin, they'll still have Dogecoin. So they'll always have a reason to mine Litecoin and to contribute to the security of that network because Dogecoin doesn't have any into its emissions. So yes, it's totally beneficial for both.
So
It also means that mining stays profitable more often because one of Litecoin or Dogecoin is up at various times. Bitcoin miners have been having big troubles recently because a lot of mining companies have folded because it's been on the border of profitability. But Litecoin mining has stayed mostly because of Doge, but it has stayed profitable.
So is merge mining that's going on today?
yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So what does that look like? You set up a mining rig and you're validating Litecoin and Dogecoin transactions at the same time, or how does that work?
I mean, from a layman's point of view, that's pretty much it. They're done. It's one process. But from a code point of view, I have no idea.
Yeah. Okay.
I'd say that's largely right. I mean, I'm not going to speak to the specific technical details of it. They're pretty deep, but yeah, that's essentially right. A block mined on one network is compatible with a block on the other, thanks to some improvements called AUX-POW, or auxiliary proof of work. So if somebody wants to look at the details of that, those are the terms you want to do if you want to get sort of deep into the implementation details.
Yeah, I've seen people shout oxpow, and I'm like, that sounds cool. Auxiliary power. Now I know. Auxiliary proof of work. Interesting.
Boxes.
Aux always sounds better than digital anyway, when you're hooking up headphones. Or a Gibson Les Paul. How long have you been playing guitar, Chromatic?
I've got a picture of myself when I was probably about 5 years old, so you do the math. It's been a few.
Nice. Yeah, I've been playing since I was 8.
Nice.
I grew into my guitar. I didn't have a mini one. I had to grow into it.
I think mine was mini, but, well, it was definitely not dreadnought size, I'll put it that way.
And you play all kinds of styles.
I play whatever sounds cool. Not everybody in the house agrees with me. They can play something different.
That's awesome. Slick, you got more questions on the Litecoin stuff?
I mean, no, I mean, I just find it interesting that we're here talking about scaling, but we're also obviously the price is substantially different than where it was. You know what I mean? So it's just like history is repeating itself. I think we hear Billy talking about that all the time, and so I just found that interesting. I wanted to learn more about it because, like he said, they're symbiotic. So it's like, if I was going to properly diversify from a crypto standpoint, right, I'm probably going to find my one crypto and then kind of go find some safe stocks to kind of hedge the volatility a little bit. But if I'm also looking to diversify from a crypto standpoint, why would I look any further than those three?
I got rid of everything and moved it to Doge. I'm finally a maxi. I had to pull out of Coinbase though, because once I saw crypto.com and then Coinbase sent this like alert saying you got to verify, you got to like revalidate your identity before January or we're going to freeze your assets. I'm not sure if like anybody else got that, but I got that in my email. And it was weird too because like you already have to send like your ID and a thumbprint, and I had to send my first child and they haven't sent her back yet. But I had to do that, and then they sent that alert, and this is when all the crypto exchanges were going belly up. And obviously Misha talks about getting off of exchanges, and there's all kinds of, every single one of them says, oh, we're fine, we're the only one that's going to be okay. And then the next one goes belly up, and then Coinbase is like, we're actually the only one that's going to be okay because we're US. And I was like, I'm not playing this, I'm out. And and I don't have a ledger or a Trezor, and I was just like, I'm not gonna keep all of these assets. I'm already down like at least 60% on every single one of them, so I just converted them all to Doge and I put it all to Core. So, but I would agree in any other case though, because I really do think the reliable, the ones that make sense are the ones that I hodl.
Well, it makes sense why they move in price kind of together to a degree until as of the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, there's what is it, the Lindy effect, which is like if something's been around for a while, then it's more likely to stay around for longer, basically. And and then there's the probably not a security side of things as well. Yeah. They share similar philosophies as far as being decentralized.
Yeah. It's like, I'm not going to get food poisoning at McDonald's. They've been around forever, so I'm going to go there. Turns out, it's trash. Okay. I want to talk about SBF. I mean, I kind of want to talk about SBF. I don't really know a lot about what's going on with that situation, but...
Why are you pretending to?
What's that?
Why are you pretending to?
I know. Because I want
I'm just kidding.
Um, so, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop all the words from it. Over leveraged lending. Um, no, I kind of want to get insight from two people who are much smarter than I. And I'd like to start with you, Chromatic. First of all, do you understand? Like, have you been following this situation with?
I've done some reading on it. I don't know if I'd say I understand it, but I feel like I have some sense of what's going on.
What is your sense of it? No one's going to hold you accountable to it. You're talking to an absolute idiot.
This is a
Allegedly.
safe.
Allegedly.
I just keep
Different.
going back to what I was saying earlier about, a bank that's doing, banking versus a bank that's doing investment. And I think if you're holding an asset for other people and that asset is valued at billions of dollars, you're always going to have this temptation to do other things with it, especially if you convince yourself that you're a safe institution and nobody's going to call all your chips all at once. And so that's the thing here. There's a great movie on All the President's Men that talks about the fall of the Nixon administration after the break-in at the Watergate Hotel in the 1972 U.S. presidential election. And there's a line in there I just keep thinking about. One of the people who's blowing the whistle on this says, "Look, these guys weren't very smart. That's it. They did something stupid. They weren't very smart." And I'm not saying anybody's stupid in this case, just that if you're leveraging things that you can't lose and something goes wrong, you can lose it all. These guys aren't very smart and things get out of hand. Well, it keeps happening over and over and over again. And that makes me think there's something structurally wrong with what all these exchanges, all these financial systems are doing. Right? If you're not keeping a good accounting of customers' money, if you are over leveraged, if you don't have the reserves to account for people making withdrawals, if all of your assets are tied in something that's incredibly volatile and it loses 20-30%, like these things can happen, if the tide's going out, are you going to be naked? That's the big question here. And I think it keeps happening over and over again. And again, my solution is treating all of this as an investment when you should be treating yourself as a bank is incredibly risky. And we keep seeing that play over and over again. I don't have a better explanation than that. That seems really simple and straightforward, and it satisfies me.
Nar? I mean, Moonlit?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I heard a lot of stories about how it happened. One was that they lent customer funds to Alameda, and then their trades went south. Another one was that they had no stop. They had a special account for Alameda on FTX where they had no stop loss facility, so their money could just could just eat up everything. And then there's what SBF said, which is, "Oh, we missed some numbers. We miscalculated our bank accounts or whatever ridiculous thing." But all I know is that it wasn't just that they had a bunch of debt. They actually had apparently they had no Bitcoin. They didn't actually have the customer funds. Um, so yeah, all I can really read out of that for sure is that at some point customer funds were taken out and used for some other shit. It wasn't just a. I mean, well, obviously it was a leverage issue, and that's why it happened. But it wasn't just like an accounting error. You don't accidentally take customers' money.
So, because the book of Isaiah says I have to speak in parables, I'm going to ask, let me say it back, the situation this way. I buy a house, and I find out that my house is sitting on a bunch of gold. And I kind of know how much it is based on the acreage and based on all kinds of calculations. So I think I've got $100 million worth of gold. So then I start saying, hey, if you want, you can invest in this. You can buy some of this. And I start handing out pieces of paper to a bunch of people, and I eventually get rid of what I think is half of it, and then I also borrow half of it for myself. And it turns out there's not that much in there. And then everybody comes home and says, "All right, I want that gold out of the ground now." And I go, "Oh, shoot, I just bought a bunch of stuff with my half, and I dug it up and I found out it's not in there. I can't give it to you." And then everyone says, "We all want it now." And then I say, "I have to file bankruptcy." Is that kind of what happened?
Yeah,
Except I
sounds like a,
inherited the gold that I'm sitting on.
and then afterwards you say, "Oops, sorry, accounting error."
Right. Is that kind of synopsis of what happened, or am I way off on my little parable, my little analogy?
I think that's a good way to think of
Kick some to his
Man, I
parents
feel
too.
so smart today. I keep saying I'm right. As long as I say it cryptically, I'm off the hook. I'm gonna FAFO, won't I? I'm glad I didn't put anything in there.
You know what I feel like FAFO from like a crypto regulation standpoint. People don't know. It's just F around and find out, right? How are you going to pay the taxes? What's it all look like? I don't know. F around and find out, right? You got FIFO, LIFO, and now you got FAFO.
FIFO, LIFO, FAFO.
That's what I thought he was referencing to it. I was like, yeah, that's funny. Everybody's always asking, well, how does
FIFO
Twitter
is
payments
first
work? How
in.
does regulation work?
FIFO is first
Yeah,
in,
first in,
first
first
out.
out.
FAFO is
LIFO.
first in my bing bong, first out.
Yeah.
Do you guys see regulation being a positive, negative, neutral on it? What's your take on where we're headed with well, first of all, what's your prediction on regulation? If you have to give one, someone's got a gun to your head. And then
Who do you want to discuss it?
I want Chromatic to go first, and then Mark.
No, I just mean that's just my. I'll ask that question
Oh,
in a
you
minute.
mean depends on who?
Yeah, like
Depends on who
who's
you
out
ask.
there fighting for it? Who's fighting for the regulation, and what are they fighting for? What's in the paperwork? Right, that's where I'm at. Go ahead.
Yeah, as far as like Congress, right? It's all over the place where they what their wants are. But Chromatic, what do you have a prediction on where we're going with regulation based on what you've been
it.
reading?
I think there are probably two or three areas where we will see a strong desire for regulation. One of them is energy consumption for proof of work. And that's something that we're going to have to think about strongly. And I've got opinions, but working code is better than opinions. And that's actually a blog post I want to put up. I haven't done it yet, but every interesting idea somebody has for moving away from proof of work, moving to useful proof of work, there are a couple of really good papers they should read that talk about some flaws in those ideas and some benefits to them. So that's one area where I think there's going to be some degree of regulation. That one's probably going to be more of a local, perhaps a state or province or a small country than like international banking regulations or a large country like the United States or Germany or something. The second area of regulation is probably, I hope it's not done poorly, but I fear it might be done poorly, is treating crypto as investment. And as a core developer, I'm not going to make any price predictions. I'm not going to suggest that you treat crypto as investment. I think that's very, very risky, and you should really think hard and understand things before you treat it as an investment. But I fear that a rushed regulation will look at anything done on the blockchain, anything financially done on the blockchain, and say this is obviously a security, like you would buy a bond or a certificate of stock or something like that, rather than
Yep.
just a medium of financial exchange. And I fear that there's going to be a rush to regulate cryptocurrency based on that. And I think that could have some really deleterious effects on things. I suspect, and this is where I'm actually hopeful, that really good regulation, if it happens, would talk about that schism between, bank and investment mechanism. And so we would have stronger ideas around exchanges or on roads, off ramps, or clearinghouses or something like that, that would separate these activities, speculation, leveraging, derivatives, from the actual process of converting to and from other cryptocurrencies, investments, securities, fiat currencies, things like that. That's the one I'm most hopeful about, because I think that could bring a lot of stability where it needs to be, and it could close some loopholes that some bad actors or some stupid actors have been using, that have caused a lot of harm to a lot of people who may not have known better, who may have seen a Super Bowl ad and said, "Hey, this looks like a really good thing to get into." Right? I think about all the institutional investors or regular people who aren't really steeped in financial lingo or things like that, who've been harmed by bad actors in these cases. And I think there is a spot where really smart regulation could curb some of these worst abuses. And I'm hopeful about those, but I don't know. It's hard to predict, especially the future.
That's good though. I mean, it's good to see the good and the bad that can come from regulation.
Yeah.
How do you tax that nuance, right? It's like, so like holding Dogecoin as more of an investment right now, it's almost like it's incentivized, right? Because if regulation came and maybe they looked at those nuances a little bit closer, so like maybe if I have my wallet and I buy a flag from Lil Kevo, the money stays in the ecosystem. There is no capital gains tax, regardless if you bought it last week or 2 years ago. There is no income tax because at that
Right.
point it's still in the ecosystem. And then once the money leaves the ecosystem is when the government should be allowed to touch it again. Right? But until it's treated like a currency and not a financial instrument. So you feel like maybe that regulation is plays a part in making that happen? Like, does that make sense? Am I making sense out of this?
Yeah. If your question is, is there a regulation? Is there a taxation policy? Depending on
Right.
whether we treat a specific cryptocurrency as currency versus an investment vehicle. That's really interesting. Let me bring that back to an earlier piece of the conversation. What happens if Twitter itself starts accepting Dogecoin payments or start transferring Dogecoin between people? If it never leaves the Twitter ecosystem, if they have like a level 2 solution, if they act as a clearinghouse or an exchange themselves, is there a taxable event? I don't know. I'm not a tax professional. I'm definitely a tax professional here, but that makes it a lot fuzzier. And there are some governments and some jurisdictions which say, I've got an opinion on that. And there are some that say, I don't have it.
I'd be willing to bet that they don't give a crap if it leaves the ecosystem. They want
Well, I'm
that
just trying to
money.
figure out the. Yeah, I know,
Well,
but
my point is this. Where I see it is as soon as CDBC becomes like more recognized as an actual like the currency, Fed coin, whatever we end up doing, that's where you're going to be tied to. You're going to be tied to that from a taxing, from a taxing standpoint, because that's where it's going to be easier to say, all right, I paid you 100 Doge for whatever. You drew me something on Twitter, and it stayed in Twitter, but they say, well, what was that in CDBC? You're going to pay me. You're going to pay the government. I don't care how it happened. I don't care what ecosystem it's in or whether it left or not. Anyway, I don't want to talk about my opinion. I want to ask about Moonlit's side of this conversation. You're in. Okay, so disclaimer: you're not in the United States, and obviously, a lot of this is centered in United States regulation. But this is a global currency.
Yeah, ish on that. Yeah, I'm not in the United States, but this kind of goes back to the Financial Action Task Force, which consults for the G7 and G20. And about a year ago, they came out with a list of proposals. They're originally a a anti-money laundering and terrorism.
Wait. Can you repeat that? They originally were what?
They're originally a anti-money laundering and terror financing
Oh, okay.
organization.
Anti-money laundering.
So they're all about like tracking money, basically. And they came up with this big list of proposals for the G7 and the G20, which are intergovernmental, agreements, organizations, about what people should do for crypto. It's a sort of fast track down the line to where people have started proposing regulation, and not just in the United States, but also in Europe. A lot of it centers around trying to track where the crypto is flowing. So there's two proposals that I know of in the United States. One is the Loomis bill, and I don't actually know the name of the other one that has been. They've both actually been tabled for now, as in they're not actually trying to pass them. But the Loomis bill is much better. That allows for up to $100 or something, or up to $200 of spending in crypto without any taxation. It provides really good clarity on what's a security and what isn't. Mostly would be proof of work currencies that aren't, because it's around debts and dividends. But it also gives the ones that have VC backing and outstanding debts an opportunity to become not securities by clearing all that out. So yeah, in general, it's a much better bill. The new one, which I don't know the name of, I think it's an acronym or something stupid. But it sort of classifies DeFi and potentially wallets and other things as exchanges, and gives them all these sort of reporting and data gathering obligations that they couldn't possibly do. So yeah, I don't know. Like, I would love the regulation that comes out in the United States to be good for crypto. But obviously the people who are making these laws don't understand any of it particularly well, and they're just consulting with people and coming, like, I guess lawmaking is always like this, right? They don't really have a clue what they're doing. So I'm not like optimistic that it's going to be a good scenario, but it could. It could. Like, if the Loomis bill came around, then there would be absolute clarity on what is a security and what isn't. There'd be a path for ones that would be currently technically securities to become legitimate, and to be commodities. And there would be some room for actually spending cryptos as currencies, and not always being taxed, and not always, not limiting it in that regard, even though it's a cap, how much you can spend or whatever. So yeah, I mean, that would be great, but it remains to be seen whether that's what you get. And because this whole thing is sort of founded in this intergovernmental agreement over money laundering, I expect regulations of a similar nature to appear in all the developed countries in the world. So yeah, we'll see what we get, but it's like it's something that people should be really engaged in, I think, because there's a potential for it to have lots of negative consequences for crypto. And I think people should be trying to pay attention to it and speaking to their politicians about it, and generally engaging with the issue, because it has a lot of far-reaching consequences.
So more people need to watch this show because we dumb it down. Because I'm an idiot. And if you can explain it to me, then the idiots writing policy can start at zero a little better. I feel like this is actually a good segue to Chromatic. You've got a really dope blog, and you're also writing Dogecoin Tricks 101, which is awesome. So let me plug those now for the audience. It's ifdogethenwow.com. All, no hyphens, no nothing, just ifdogethenwow.com. And you have a book called Dogecoin Tricks. You also have outspeaking.com, which is almost like you're writing articles.
Well, I edit that one. I'm not the only person who's written there, but yes,
Ah, okay.
that's a link.
Got it. So you have articles written by other people on there as well on outspeaking.com. And then if dogethenwow.com, it's kind of your blog. And then your book, The Dogecoin Tricks 101, contains a lot of welcome to Doge, written extremely simply for an idiot like myself to be able to kind of understand the real good basics. Tell me about those.
Where would you like me to start?
Let's start with outspeaking.com. So I got the page pulled up. What is
Yeah,
it?
that's a website. A co-author of mine many years ago had bought the domain name and said, "I'm not going to do anything with this. Do you want it?" And I said, "That's a cool name. Sure." And so I had the idea of creating like a forum. This was probably before Facebook took over all the news. And so I was thinking about publishing like long form articles. It hasn't been updated in quite a while. It's probably getting a little bit creaky these days and could use a visual makeover. But yeah, that's the story behind that. It was a really cool name, and I thought, this would be a good use for it. So that is a thing that exists, and I will continue paying for the domain name as long as it's awesome, and I will continue doing that.
Got it. So this is at the top of your bio, but if Doge then wow is not. It's because you bought
Yeah,
this
I should.
domain. You're strangling it alive. I'm just kidding.
Exactly.
Well, very cool. So this is where you can get to know Chromatic as far as an editing perspective. Get to know kind of what he thinks is cool and not cool for other authors as well. So this is kind of like a blog, but it's more news oriented. How do I get to your actual? So I've got ifdogeandwow.com open, and I'm on /books/Dogecoin tricks. This has this has some information on your Dogecoin 101. You've got a PDF preview. This is
Yes,
not as pretty as the one I've seen.
the preview.
Yeah, the PDF preview is not as pretty as what I had seen. Let's go to your
Okay. All right. Well, that's a bummer because I probably did it on my laptop instead of my desktop, and I can fix that. So I will fix that. Thank you for the feedback.
um, there was okay. So here's the 101 tricks. Oh, here it is. Okay, so this PDF loads well. So yeah, if you go on the website, it's not as clean. But if you go to at chromatic_x, that's his Twitter. You
And I'm
got
just
the
on the website.
PDF
Fix.
link here. Yeah.
So anybody who's listening to this in the future, will have a nice.
Yes, but I do really like the PDF the PDF style. It's kind of written like it's like a scientific paper abstract. Um, it's well done, and it what I like about it is it kind of goes into the basics, running your own node. It explains everything in English. You don't have to be afraid that hey, this guy's a developer. He's gonna speak developerese to me, and I am going to get overwhelmed with information. Instead, it tells you how to set up your own node, the adding a wallet to a DNS record if you host a website, some cool tips and tricks. Very, it's like learning Hello World, honestly. Off the internet. What made you decide to write this?
It's a great question. I'm not sure. That's back in the day. Oh, let me look at the actual copyright data on this one here. Back in the day, I worked for a computer publishing company. And a really good buddy of mine, I think I've told a bit of this story on Twitter. A good buddy of mine was working at this company. He actually left and formed his own company, then was bought out by Twitter, was like employee number 5 or 6 or something really early. He started this book series called Hacks. And the first book he did was Google Hacks. And again, this is like 2002, 2003, as more and more people were discovering, oh, Google is more than just a search engine. Yeah, I don't think Gmail had come out yet, various things like that. But he just said, we're going to sit down, 2 or 3 of us, and write down, 2, 3, 4 pages of 100, 101 cool things you can do with Google. And they put out this book, and it was wildly popular. I edited a book. I have this on my hand right now. You totally cannot see it. I'm waving it on my phone right now. It's called Gaming,
What's it
where
called?
we took
Say it again.
gaming, like games, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we took like 100 cool ideas. I worked with a great guy, Simon Carles, great guy. I worked with him. I edited this book. We put this together. And let me just pick up some of these hacks. Here's one of them. Choose a machinima engine. So this is when like red versus blue on Halo was really. Here's 4 or 5 pages on how to pick an engine to do your own in-game videos, like they were doing, like Rooster Teeth was doing with Machinima. There's one, how to program music for the Nintendo Entertainment System. Take an old video game controller and hook it up to your PC. Just all these weird things. I remember one, I can't even find it right now, but there's this camera attachment you can get for the original Game Boy. And Simon figured out how to take, it only took black and white pictures. Simon figured out how to take some really small color cells. This is just colored pieces of plastic, and put those in little slots and put those over the lens of the Game Boy camera and take color pictures with your Game Boy, which is just here's a whole bunch of bizarre stuff in around this topic. So I really enjoyed that series. And as I was working on my blog, I thought, I just kept coming back to these ideas. Hey, here's a cool idea I could do in an afternoon. This sounds really familiar, like that old hack series I used to work on. So that was the genesis of this. Just thinking, I enjoy doing this. I've got all the software I used to be able to make books like this before, to make good-looking PDFs, or in this case, mediocre-looking PDF that I can fix tomorrow, I totally promise. I just had this idea, why not put this out there and see what happens, right? And we can run the gamut from very, very simple stuff like, here's how I change the comment that my node sends to everybody else when it connects to the network, to here's something really interesting, like how can I set up my own payment system, right? So my hope is that there's something for everyone in here, from someone who's just getting their feet wet to an experienced developer, even if they're not hacking on the core or something like that. And even if you're more on the one side than the other, hopefully it's still readable. You can look at it and say, that's interesting. I learned something. This gave me a new idea. I can remix these into some other approaches or whatever, right? And if someone else from Litecoin or Bitcoin or Lucky Coin or some other coin or something like that looks at these and says, this would be a cool addition to our own network or ecosystem, go for it. Feel free, take it. It's more important that people learn things, learn how to do things well, and have a good time doing it, then we need to keep all these wonderful ideas to ourselves. That's my philosophy on this. I don't know. I'm kind of all over the place on this, but it was a whole bunch of ideas bouncing around in my head that wouldn't stop until I just started writing them down.
That's awesome. And that's kind of what the call for me was when I brought up, or when we first started. I had worded it like, are developers oversimplifying it to a degree to where newcomers who are going from zero, it's difficult for them to feel like they can go to hero, right? And
Right.
And we talked about GitHub, and your 101 guide talks about GitHub, and it explains the core development process in plain English. It's not in developerese. This is one of the more refreshing things about speaking with developers who can speak in lay terms, and that's what this does, right? I've got it pulled up on my screen. I'm not sure if you can see it, but it talks about the world of Dogecoin and cryptocurrency. This means that we have to follow rigorous, tested, and well understood mathematical principles and formulas. We have to adhere to well-defined rules and parameters for participation. We have to trust the software we use to implement all of these things correctly, right? It's
Yeah.
not It's not highly technical. It's got links directly to the GitHub, takes you there, kind of explains how you can understand the layout of it, navigating core. So I am going to recommend this to everybody in the audience. I love that you're doing this, and I'm excited for more. Are you looking for help in this front? Is there ways that the community can support you on getting simplified Doge understanding to the broader audience?
Yes, absolutely. Well, one of the things I really loved about this format, because there's 101 of these things, I don't have to write them all. And if someone wants to suggest something that they can write, or suggest an author, or write one themselves, or contribute to someone else, the GitHub repository is open. And I would be happy to take any and all feedback there. And again, right, like what we were talking about earlier, if you see a typo, I misspelled a word, or I used a British version where the American version would do, or whatever, feel free to get on GitHub yourself and send me a pull request, open an issue, anything like that. Feedback is great. I mean, that's one of the things that I don't want to speak for all developers, but anybody who's working on open source, getting feedback from other people saying, I use this and it made my life easier, or I use this and here's an improvement, or just, I use this. Getting that feedback is great, because sometimes it seems like, we're all sitting in our offices in the void and never hearing from it. But if this work made you smile, if it inspired you, if it made your life easier, if it just passed some time while you're waiting for a bus or something like that, that's great feedback, and don't feel shy about that. Now, if you look at this and you don't like it, now is the time for silent personal reflection. But no, I'm kidding. Feedback is
Send
definitely
it
looking forward to it.
to Greg on Twitter if you don't like it.
Exactly.
Where's the repository for your 101?
I will make sure to link from Twitter. You can find it at github.com/chromatic. And there's a link to that repository on there. There's a link to online repositories on there. It's also linked from the book homepage on If Doge Then Why.
Got it. So we can go to chromatic, and then I can go to repositories up here, and then here's
Yeah.
Dogecoin Tricks book right at the top.
That's the one.
And then you can star it, and you can see what changes are happening if you're logged in, and you can see all the documentation. So this is a cool way, I think, for your average shibe to contribute to the broader community, because I feel like information like this can be very helpful, and maybe end up on Dogecoin.com if the foundation's watching and they see stuff that's on here that's useful for I think for everybody to know, which something like I don't know, downloading your own node and how that works, kind of important. So really, really cool. I love it.
Thank you.
There was another thing I wanted to understand, if you're willing.
I know.
You know where I'm headed with this?
I think I do.
Okay. Aha. With a bit 21 transaction where you specify the amount, you can use the transaction amount to unlock specific URL until the transaction settles. And you kind of have like a long thread. It's very technical. I'm sure it's probably geared more towards your technical friends. What are you saying in this? It's Greek.
Well, one of the things I'd love to be able to do is to be able to say, if you're looking at my website and you want to get your own PDF of this book, pay me in Dogecoin. Mm-hmm. And the interesting thing there is, I think there are clever ways to do it without reusing addresses, where I can give you just a specific address, QR code, link, and my website will just sit and wait until I receive the correct amount of Dogecoin, and then it will give you a personalized link you can use to download this file. And so in that thread, I was working through ways to do this. I think the approach I put there has some flaws. As our friend Patrick said, think about this really hard before you want to do it. I think it could work. It definitely has some flaws. I think there's a different approach I'm going to end up taking, and I'll probably write about that as well. But that's essentially what this is, right? With an almost infinite address space where you can receive payments and you want to deliver some good or service digitally, is there a really good way of giving every potential customer a way to pay you and giving them a personalized way to access whatever you want them to access? Right. And I think there are some very quick and clever ways to do that. There's some bits on the server I haven't talked about that I've proven to my satisfaction they work, but I want to get a little bit further along with the actual managing of addresses before I
Don't
talk a
listen
lot
to
more.
Pat. He's a party pooper. Just run
Yes,
with it.
he's party people, so you have to listen to him. It's really important.
Take the risks. Destroy
Yeah,
the
the other day I threw out that thread on interchange, man, and I asked Jimmy. Jimmy was texting me, and I was like, responds. I'm like, this was Jimmy's idea. Like, I just can communicate from a merchant standpoint things, and my chest got all tightened up, and he's talking about shit that I don't even know. It's a whole different language to me, and so we live in two different worlds, and I just buckled, and then I had to just take a deep breath and really think and read his post like 10 times.
It's important to listen when Patrick talks because he has a very strong belief that you should know the pros and cons of what you're doing. And I think it's really important to have someone with such a strong ethical point of view always here to be our conscience. That's really good, especially someone who's very knowledgeable and smart and clever like he is. I've had people who act as conscience who didn't know nearly as much as he did, and that's a little bit tricky. And I've known people who were very, very smart and didn't have ethics at all, and that's very, very scary. So having that combination in Pat is really, really worthwhile. I'm glad to have it.
Mm. So how do you divide your time? I mean, working on a front end experience on your web front, and then working on core. Obviously your guitar is probably covered in dust and spider webs by now.
Well, one of them is, but
It's the Stratocaster, isn't it?
no, I got to fix the tension on the Les Paul. I got a couple of frets that are a little bit too high, so that one's been a bit dusty for a bit.
Well, don't resort to replacing the neck.
No, just a couple of turns on the rod there should be fine.
Yeah, how do you make time for this? I mean, it's overwhelming for someone like me. But then again, you might be just like that second nature with your coding, but I don't know. So I do a little bit of coding, right? And it's like JavaScript and basic stuff. But
Yeah.
when I get into that, I am pulling an all-nighter. I'll get obsessive compulsive over, one function to try and get it to work. And I can't sleep until it's done. And that will eat up all of my time. And then work will slide. Unless it's work related, then my other work items will slide. I would not even think like, okay, front end experience, a browser plugin or a API or a tool that you can put in on your header. Yeah, how do you do it?
I think some of it is just years of experience. And that's knowing where to put my time and effort, the smallest amount of work that gets me the maximum effect. And I know this is probably not satisfying to hear, but there are a lot of programmer jokes that go around at what a novice might program is very simple and straightforward. What a person with 5 or 10 years of experience might do, it looks more complex or or something like that. And then what a real expert will do is very, very small and simple, probably similar to the novice. I don't want to consider myself an expert. I think everybody has a lot to learn. That's why I call myself a junior developer. But I do have some years under my belt here. And so some of this is just looking for the simplest way to hook things together that doesn't have any obvious flaws. And some of it is years of experience doing this and realizing that what I didn't think was an obvious flaw in retrospect should have been an obvious flaw. So part of it is that, right? You have to find a way to manage the complexity of things. Part of it is also I type really fast and I've got a lot of time to think about things. So, if you've got a long commute or something like that, or if you're out watering the flowers and waiting for all of the water to come out from the flowers to, someone's satisfaction, or whatever it is, right? Or if you're up all night taking care of a family member or feeding a baby or something like that, and you've got time to think about these things, sometimes getting the problem really, really solid in your head is 80% of the work, and the rest of it is a lot more straightforward. And I think having the years of experience makes that 20% closer to 20%, not another 80%.
Let me ask you this. We've had other developers on the show before, and just in my experience on Twitter as well, sometimes what I hear is, "Hey, we get demotivated when we're fighting different battles, and there's different stuff going on." What would be your advice to that concern?
That's a great question.
Just getting demotivated, whether it's personal attacks, whether it's just fighting different battles on Twitter. You seem to be on Twitter just as much as the next guy.
Yeah.
You seem very well motivated. I see that you're working actively on core, and you're working on other fronts as well. Yeah.
I think you have to enjoy yourself, and I realize I say that and it sounds like a very privileged position to take, right? And to some extent it is. I will acknowledge that I've been a very blessed person in that, I have sometimes I have the time and the resource to be able to do these things. But if you look at the tricks book and you think about, the word count there, I'm a good writer, I'm an experienced writer, but I'm also writing, 2, 3, maybe 4 pages. That's not hours and hours of work. That's a long career of writing, communicating, editing, developing that's gone into making it so I can write, a couple of thousand words in maybe a couple hours or something like that. It's finding the motivation, finding your skills, and being able to put those two together, right? There are some days where I don't want to code. There are some days where I'd rather veg out and watch TV or play a video game or do things with my family, play board games, whatever that looks like. And that's fine, right? You should do things that contribute to your life in a positive way. And I think you should try to do things that contribute to the world in a positive way. And if you can do both of those things, at least for me, I get motivation from that. And if you don't, then don't feel obligated. That's the important thing, right? Especially on open source free software projects like this. If you feel like, talking on Twitter to people, convincing someone to take Dogecoin or trying to do a translation or add a new feature, something like that, if you feel like that's work and you're not enjoying it and that's a slog and you don't see an end in sight, stop doing it. You don't need anybody's permission to stop doing something you don't enjoy. And so maybe this is more about how to avoid demotivation, but how to get motivated for things is find the joy in it if you can. And again, right, nobody's sitting down and offering me, a big check to do this all day, every day. I'd probably turn it down if they did, because
You didn't get
that
the
would turn
check
it
for
into
coming on this
routine.
podcast?
I didn't even get a
I
blue
mean,
check.
It's
we can
getting
relate with that.
Weird. Right. We're waiting for the transaction to roll up. Yeah.
Layer 2.
For me, that's what it is, right? The motivation is, am I enjoying this? I could be doing a lot of things with my time. Is this something where I feel fulfilled by doing it? And so far it is. And at some point in the future, if that happens, that it's no longer the case, I hope I have the wisdom and grace to stop doing it for a time or for good and hand off to someone else. But I think that's the thing, right? Once you start seeing it as an obligation and it turns into a grind, that's when the demotivation starts. That's when the burnout starts. And for any developer or anybody who's working on a technical project or a community project and hearing this, you don't need my permission to stop doing something you don't enjoy, but you have my full support. If it's not bringing you joy, if it's not fulfilling you, then you should think about giving it up. You owe it to yourself not to spend time doing things that drain you.
That's something we preach, just so we're all staying on the same wavelength. Like once this becomes a job, and it's no longer fun, right? It's really motivating when you guys want to come here and talk about the exciting stuff and the stuff that needs to get put into this to get to the next level, and that stuff's motivating for us. So thanks for being here too. I want to say that.
Is a great example, right? It's a lot of work to put these things together and do them.
Yeah, it is when everybody's in different time zones.
Exactly.
Gosh, it's the perspective's nice though. That's what's nice about having people all over with different perspectives, right? I can talk about regulation all I want, but you know what? I can't because I'm bypass what Moonlit's got to talk about, right? Because worlds. Yeah.
So we did have another subject. I'd love to be able to talk about it. Chromatic, again, you weren't expecting to be here for as long as you have. And that's the fun thing that we do. We trick everybody on our shows, and they sign up for an hour, and then they end up hanging out for multiple hours. And it blows by for me especially. But would you be willing to hang around? If not, understandable. But I do want to talk about the Twitter files. I want to talk about free speech, the Twitter experience. I'll leave it up to you, Chromatic, and then Nar, if you're able to hang out too, I'd love to. Oh, go ahead. Say that again.
I can hang out for another 20 or so. I want to give Moonlit a chance to speak, though. I feel like I've been sort of monopolizing it for a bit.
Sure. Moonlit, you still there? Or did we put you to sleep?
I'm still here.
Awesome. Your puppet's still blinking, so you're awake. So, free speech, right? There was an interesting free speech space with Billy and who was it? The Zuby was on there. I'm not sure. Did you guys get a chance to listen to that?
I did not know.
Okay.
I miss most.
Upward and onward. Free speech is the most important topic of Twitter, thanks to Elon taking over. And obviously, there's some interesting figures, interesting happenings. We've had Kanye come back and say some fun things, and then he disappeared. Obviously, all the Doge community left. Apparently, they're all back, by the way. So from within this show.
Yo, I'm back, baby. I am back.
Okay, so you were one of those.
Thanks, Pat. Also, we got the Canodally confirmation that he does run a host of nodes.
He does. All right.
Pat quote tweeted you and like
Misha hosts 7 canodes.
Canodals.
So yeah, how do you guys feel? What's the direction Twitter's headed? Moonlit, where are we headed? Are we going off a cliff, or are we going up a mountain?
Yeah, I'm more of a free speech absolutist than Elon probably is. And I mentioned way before that on Minds.com, that's somewhat what Elon originally pitched Twitter would be, where users have control over, like, if they don't want to see nudity, or they don't want to see gore, or they don't want racially charged, politically, edgy content, they can opt into those things if they want, and they're off by default. That's sort of what Elon originally pitched, was that it would be down to the users, and that we'd have clear guidelines about what was not okay and what was okay. And then pretty much since he's got in charge, he's just been making it up as he goes along. He hasn't yet done any of the things that he said he would do, except for the bots. He's been taking on the bots. I don't know. I don't know what it looks like for Twitter. Like, And Kanye's a whole mess. Like, he's obviously mentally ill. He's saying some completely wacky things. What was the thing on Instagram that he said? He said that Elon was part of a Chinese African breeding program, and
No
that they've
way.
been breeding Chinese African clones. Yeah, yeah, I said something like that. But
Oh,
breeding African models with Chinese people, and he said there were 14 of them, and he was a successful one. Or something. It's like, the
no.
stuff he's saying.
Tell me he
The stuff
linked
he's saying.
the Chinese Elon guy. You know, the one that got famous for looking like Elon Musk? Tell me he included him.
When everyone was talking about it on Twitter, they were posting pictures of him. But no, he did. But yeah, so he's obviously whacked out.
I just like
I don't know,
picturing
like
this in Kanye's head. Like he's got the real Elon and he's got the Chinese Elon. And he's just like, this one didn't make it.
this one didn't quite work out. Yeah, I don't know. Obviously,
That's terrible.
it's hard to. I've got like a background in psychology for that dude, so like I kind of get. I get that guy's off the rails and he's going to wake up really embarrassed one day. That's assuming he ever gets well again. Yeah. So it's kind of, it is funny, but also like there's a big spectacle about it. Gee,
We're
that's
out of money. We're out
like
of money over here to perform lobotomies.
imagine if you went on a big drug bender and then you wake up the next day and you've got no money and everybody thinks you're a Nazi. Like, that's probably what he's going to be dealing with one day. Yeah.
Even MC Hammer didn't have to go through that.
And that's the thing, MC Hammer, he had that huge house and there were rooms he'd never been in and they were all filled with parachute pants. It was really embarrassing fall from grace there.
Were they really filled with parachute pants? I believe you. If you just say
I
yes.
don't think it's true, but it's totally believable, isn't it?
Yes.
It's a good story.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know what Twitter's gonna end up looking like. You know, I mean, like I think there's a site called MeWe, which is another one of these sort of free speech sites, but it's got a really like there's no hate speech and it's got a really kind of big content policy, and it's always been the sort of in between. And I guess that's probably where Twitter will end up. Like not anything goes, but anything goes within the sort of middle, if that makes sense.
Anything can be held against you. You know, wasn't that Elon's tweet the other day? Well, I mean, if they go into the Twitter payment space, aren't people going to have to verify themselves? Beyond just a credit card.
Yeah, that's confusing because like you don't really want to ban people from a payment service. So what happens then? You know, he wants to get as many people paying each other as possible, and then you can't really kick people off when they're saying naughty things. I guess those two things will have to be separate. I guess that's the biggest sense that I have about this whole change in Twitter is it's like he's got a lot of big plans and everything's moving and there's not a lot of sort of okay, now we do this thing and then we're going to do that thing and then we're going to do that thing. Like it's all very ad hoc. So
Yeah.
you know, like he wants to make Twitter into a super app. That's like an app store basically. Um, where you have apps inside the main app. If he did that,
Yep.
then Apple and Google would throw a fit. Unless it somehow managed to become super popular before then, and they couldn't, they wouldn't like that. So I don't know. It's very on the fly, and I don't know what it ends up looking like.
How do you see it? What's the ideal? What's the utopian Twitter? I mean, do you rip the Band-Aid and you allow what? You know, I look at Reddit, right? And I follow subreddits like, damn, that's interesting. And it used to be like, oh, this is interesting. And then now there's like gore shock. And like, next thing you know, you're seeing someone die. And all the comments they always have to be something snarky. And I'm like, dude, you literally just watched someone lose their life. And I wasn't expecting it, right? Because it's supposed to be kind of like interesting and unexpected and neat. And then all of a sudden you're like, I just watched someone die. And there's no personal flag for it. There's no way they can tag it. It's human moderated, so you have a group of moderators looking at all the content going on that subreddit. How do you prevent that kind of experience? It seems to be wide on every social media platform.
It's complicated, eh? I mean, you can't, like, if you've got there's 400 million people on Twitter, you can't get any number of a moderation team and have them actually like police all the content that all the users are posting. That's impossible.
Well, it's possible.
And you
They did it in
I
the
mean,
Twitter
they could.
files.
Yeah. Well, not only that, they could probably recruit a few Doge Army members to pull it off.
I mean, you can outsource
Policing
it.
going on around here.
Totally unbiased.
You can outsource it, but you can't catch everything that way. And if you're going to do it like with a large moderation team, you're going to get inconsistent decisions and things that are subjective. And so you can't yet use an AI to do it for you because it's going to make mistakes just like a human being would. What Minds does is they get people to label sensitive content, whether it's like anti-Semitism or gore or porn or whatever it is. They have to put it in a category. And if they don't put their posts in the category, after 3 strikes, their whole account gets flagged as not safe for work. And users can flag those people. And there's also an appeals process where people can vote on whether the decision was correct. So there's a whole complicated system that's sort of partly outsourcing or largely outsourcing the content moderation to the user base. And that actually works reasonably well. And it's more along the lines of what I'd like to see with Twitter, where you're like, I don't want to see porn on my phone, or I don't want to see gore, or I don't want to see racist comments or whatever it is. And those are all off by default. And if you decide that you want to be an edgy space, then you can choose to be an edgy space. But yeah, in terms of like technical solutions, other than like outsourcing it like that, I don't know that there really is one.
I wonder if there's a way to flag your content categorically. Facebook kind of has something like that, where it's like you mark it. Reddit has one where you mark it in NSFW, right? But that's like one flag. But I wonder, I mean, Twitter obviously has plenty of nudity and pornography. It'd be nice if people were like, all right, I'm going to flag. They just put like an 18 or whatever, 18 plus on their bio. That's one thing. But that doesn't help, right? From a retweet or anything like that, it'd be nice if you flagged it as like, all right, this is an OnlyFans account. This is a shock account. This is a political account, and you can flag your content like tagging your tweets the way that you do now. Like today, you can put hot take, right? I wonder if there's some way to do something like that to where it's like, all right, everyone who flags it with, something about Joe Biden or President Biden or President Trump, I could just be like, all right, ignore, without ignoring the entire hashtags or whatever. It's a little broken.
Yeah, and the system on Twitter right now where you can do mute words and things like that, it's not very good. It doesn't work a lot of the time.
I'm sure 14, 15-year-old prepubescent Jimmy would love to catch those flags so he could find his stuff quickly.
That's true. I could sort through my own Rolodex. My shit posts.
I think that is the way to go, though. I think that that was what Elon originally proposed, which is where users can choose what type of content they want. The only issue there is you need people to flag it. There's got to be a motivation to flag it, like a punishment.
Right.
Okay.
Well,
so they're actually motivated to do it.
That would be great, right? If you're flagging something as My Little Ponies, and then next thing it's completely different. You know what I'm saying? Uh, People can report it and be like, "All right, this ain't a My Little Ponies account.
Yeah.
You're permanently not. You're not a brony." Chromatic, what's your take? Where do you see this free speech thing going? Is it good or bad? Going off a cliff or up a mountain?
I don't know, it's really complicated, right? I mean, there are some things that no amount of speech is going to change what it is, right? I mean, if you believe, for example, the Earth is flat and 6 weeks old or something like that, I
And it's
don't
not.
know. Well, I mean, we could get into the idea of epistemology and ask these questions, but let's assume, for the sake of argument, it's substantially older than 6 weeks old. Right? We weren't all born yesterday. We're not just butterfly brains in a jar. Right? If you have an idea like that, I don't know that there's a lot of debate we need to have about that idea. And I'm not saying you shouldn't be allowed to express that idea. I'm just saying I'm not convinced that this notion of the marketplace of ideas should give that idea any more weight than, we have the empirical method. We've got this evidence from all these reasons that, yes, we landed on the moon, or yes, the Earth does revolve around the sun, or yes, the Earth is, spherical more or less instead of just, a flat disk or something like that, right? And I'm picking ideas that aren't super controversial because I don't want to get too controversial here. I'm not convinced by the free speech absolutist sense that the best alternative to speech that is demonstrably wrong or potentially harmful is more speech. I think there are some ideas that we've pretty much defeated now, right? But on the other hand, I think that a community happens deliberately, whether through action or inaction. One of the original websites, Slashdot, I used to work for that. I used to write for that. I did some code for that back in the day. It had its in-group. It had its chatter. It had its memes before memes were what we think of memes are now, right? It had its jokes. It had jokes about Natalie Portman. It had jokes about hot grits. It had jokes about all sorts of really, really stupid things in retrospect. Year of the Linux desktop, for example. These are things that sort of grew up, but the community supported them because the community tolerated them. And so my thinking about free speech is, if you're a person who's part of a community, think about what things you tolerate implicitly or explicitly, and think about what kind of community you want to be. So, for example, to the extent that I have a say in the growth of the Dogecoin community, I want that community to include as many people as possible. I want that community to be a healthy community. I want that to be a community that respects individuals and their differences. And that's going to include things like, what country do I live in? What device am I connecting to? How many funds do I have available? Can I participate in the network? Can I express an opinion? Can I talk to other folks? I'm going to get chased off and things like that. I want a community that's inclusive as possible. That's going to make certain things easier. That's going to make certain things more difficult. That's going to mean we have to do work to do certain things, right? If we had someone who tried to be a shibe, but that person believed that, anybody outside of the United States or Canada shouldn't participate in the network, we should have a two-tiered system. I think we should band together against that idea and reject it, whatever band together and reject mean in that sense. I don't know if that's a speech issue or what, but what I do know is, if we treat speech as an abstract thing that is good in and of itself, without thinking of the effects on other people we might want to include or exclude, we're missing something. And that's the piece of it I want to make sure that we think about very carefully. That's the piece that goes missing in these issues, and that's the piece that I care about most deeply, I think.
I love that take, and I also love that you tried as hard as you could to be unspecific and still ended up landing specific situations across the board.
But I heard that sentence out of my mouth and thought, let's be butterflies in a jar here. And no spoilers for Peacemaker, by the way. Just different butterflies in different jars.
It's what's interesting. So when I proposed this question or posed this question, I was asking if you guys had listened to that space with Billy and Zuby, and one of the people who hopped into the free speech space was Eric Weinstein. The guy just comes in and drops knowledge, bounces, doesn't even like open up a dialogue. And I was like, dude, this isn't fair, because I like him. He's an intelligent person who was on Joe Rogan a couple times, but he talks about free speech from a culture perspective, and he talks about how things used to be and how things are now, and how there's a culture that you can build where it's you are free to say whatever you want to say, but there's certain things that are, for the most part, plain old not okay. And as a culture, you can respect someone's respectful opinion, and we need to be in
Right.
that position. There was a day where you can, and I'm just thinking of this on this Biden tweeting, Hitler is bad, right? And I quote tweeted it and was like, so brave, so stunning. As a joke, thinking like, okay, you don't have to say that. But apparently today you do. Because if one of the things he included in his tweet was silence is complicity, or something to that effect. And it's like, so allegedly today, you have to denounce Nazism. But before, you didn't have to. It was an unspoken, agreed upon across the world, for the most part, that you really just didn't have to say anything. Just we all agreed. But now the culture has changed. So, maybe this started with like, go punch a Nazi, whatever, trend. Or maybe it started with SLC Punk. I don't know, in the 90s, or 2000s. But I don't know how we got to where we are. But to me, we're far enough from the culture we used to have, which is if you dropped the wrong thing at the wrong time, the other person kind of had the right to punch you in the face. And there was like this unspoken gentleman's rule where you just didn't say stupid stuff. But apparently Twitter has evolved, social media has evolved, and people feel entitled to be able to say provocative things, even if they don't necessarily believe them, which is a troll. How do we bring the culture to what you are talking about? And what I believe Eric was alluding to is like fostering that culture in a sub community, because now there's so many communities. It's not just a Twitter community, there's a Doge community within the Twitter community. And there's not just a Doge community, there's a node community. you know how do we foster that?
I'll tell you what I work on myself, and that's reminding myself I can argue on Twitter or Reddit or wherever, Facebook, sometimes with my cousins. I ask myself, what do I expect out of this? Am I going for a dopamine hit? Am I going for a really good, well-crafted insult? Is that going to make me feel better, or am I going to go to bed and say, I'm just going to mute this whole conversation because I don't even want to think about it anymore? I'm not looking forward to enjoying myself by reading the next thing in this argument I'm having with my cousin. Realizing that, not only is this an argument I'm having with him, but my other cousins are looking at this and going, oh man, these two are going at it again. What a waste of my time, right? And if I have to look at them over a holiday dinner and they're like, you're kind of a jerk online, that means something to me, right? Their opinion of me matters.
Mm-hmm.
And more than that, I think about my cousin, and I don't really want to insult him. I don't want to hurt his feelings. I'll tease him, I'll rib him and things like that, but that's as far as I want to go. And this is somebody I know in real life, and somebody I've known for many, many years, and somebody I care about. And I think about the other people on the other side of the phone or the keyboard or something like that and think, they're human beings too. And they care about some things I do. They don't care about things I do. They care about things differently, but they're going to have to get up in the morning and look at themselves. They're going to have to go to bed and dream whatever they're going to do. For me, it's just reminding myself to have that empathy for them. Even if I disagree with them on just about everything, I don't really want to cause them harm. I may disagree with them, but can I keep that in a way that is likely to get positive effects out of this? Now, if I'm arguing with a politician on Twitter who I think is really a terrible person, I'm probably arguing with the staffer. I'm not going to convince a politician. And maybe the best I can do is convince other people reading this that there's something to what I said rather than what the other person is thinking. Maybe that's the best I can do is convince other people than the person I'm arguing with. But even that, the question there is, am I getting something positive out of this? Is this worth my time, or should I go do something else instead that I'm going to enjoy? That to me is my rule. But everybody has to draw their own line somewhere. I just hope people listening to this draw their line in which way they're, treating other people well as much as possible. That if you can do that, try to do that, please.
Reddit tries to consolidate everything that you just said into 3 words. Remember the human. That's their rule 1 for every subreddit.
Yeah.
Nobody does.
No, it's not easy.
It's not easy. It's extremely easy to see somebody as a profile picture, and not human.
Out there is so complicated.
Yeah.
That's about half a dozen things popped into my head in response to your question there, and there's probably still another dozen things that could come out of there. But yeah, what Chromatic just said is kind of the bottom layer of it, which is that it comes down to empathy. And empathy isn't something that you can impose or force on people from the outside. It's something that you have to learn. And you learn it by other people showing it to you. So yeah, basically do only good every day. Is really like it's people being against other people and trying to hurt them and their own perception of other people victimizing them or whatever, all that stuff like the resentment. That's where all that like identitarianism and all that crazy stuff comes from, and it does just come down to like trying to understand where people are coming from and their own experiences.
Head on.
People are pretty
I can
tribal.
relate.
That's
Yeah.
that's a tough wire to rewire in people.
Well, not only are they tribal, but we're all exposed to each other now on the internet. In a way where back in the day you had your peer group, you had people around you, you had your friends and family. You might have had some disagreements there, but now we've got this instinct when someone else says something that disagrees with what we think, and we like, I don't know if it's self-doubt or whatever, but we feel compulsed to like say the thing, even if we're not like trying to correct a wrong or whatever. We just need that other person to agree with us. We need that to happen for some psychological reason.
Yeah.
And that scale of the internet, with all these people disagreeing with each other, it's like we're sort of constantly in its defensive state.
Yeah. Well, I feel like the impulse for me, I guess if I were to like self-actualize it in full transparency, would be if someone says if they disagree with me on something, my instinct is to immediately put them into the box of other people who disagree with me, and put them into otherism. You know what I mean? It's
Right.
I made a meme about it where it's like it was Super Nintendo versus Sega, and one person says one thing, and then the person who responds says, "Well, you're one of them, right?" They all of them are like this, and it's the easiest way to draw a box around people, because as soon as you do, you have control over them again in your own head. You don't obviously control them, but as long as you can control your image of them, then you feel like you have control, and that's what people want, is some kind of control over themselves and control over their own reality. Easiest way to do that is if someone is something that you don't understand, is to make yourself understand them, and the only way you can do that is to AI it. That's the way AI works. AI is trained to say, all right, I think this is similar to this, therefore this is a duck. So you say you know, Bitcoin is great. Bitcoin is great. I'm gonna be like, all right, you're a Bitcoin maxi. Maybe that's not the case. I've learned to force myself to ignore that instinct to be able to talk to people. Michael SB on Twitter is a great example. I've disagreed with him on stuff, but we've always had really cordial conversations. And he's one of the more respectful people who will have a great disagreement. And I know he's still human. So I know he's not I can't draw a box around him. I should practice doing that more. I feel like more people could benefit from that.
Think about all the things you're missing out on too, right? If you go back to the Super Nintendo versus Sega Genesis question,
Oh,
if
here
you're
we go,
Super
Sega
Nintendo,
guy.
hey,
I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
if you're Super Nintendo all the way, that's cool. You got to link to the past, but you're not going to play NBA Jam, and vice versa if Sega Genesis. Whereas you should be able to play both of them. Just my humble opinion. You're missing out by picking one over the other. You got to make friends with
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you never grow. You know, you never take on new opinions if you're always trying to defend yours and put other people in boxes or argue with them, whatever. Then you could occasionally be like, "Oh, I see that new thing." If you, what I try to do is just be polite to everyone. I'm not always perfect at it, but I try to be polite to everyone, even when they're not being polite. And sometimes I'll get into a conversation where there's some commonality and some understanding emerges rather than just people trying to prove each other wrong. You'd be like,
Always
Oh,
trying to get a leg
yep.
up.
that's why they come from that angle. That's that you know, you learn something, you expand yourself.
I think the
You
Dogecoin.
know,
Oh, go ahead, Slick.
I was just gonna say there's growth in humility. I mean, like we're all crypto is such unnavigated territory, and to like come here and to think that you're not gonna make mistakes. You're with that mentality, you're gonna make mistakes. You're gonna make a lot of mistakes. Like we're all gonna be naive, and there's times that we need humble to like. I need humbled all the time, you know, and I get it at work. I get it in my personal life, and that helps me grow, right, and become more aware of things outside of my perception of reality.
But it's easier to be humble when other people are being kind to you.
Yeah, that's a fact.
That's the thing. I have this old colleague, Audrey Tang, who's the culture minister for Taiwan. And she had this wonderful technique she developed way back when called troll hugging. Someone would come into a project community and say something really provocative, and what Audrey did was encourage the community to embrace this person, not literally, but in the sense that this is a person who is coming into the community and expressing opinion for some reason. What's behind that? Let's see if there's something interesting, useful we can learn from. And it didn't always work in the sense that didn't always convert this troll into a productive community member. But sometimes it drove the troll off because they wanted to get people's hackles up. They wanted to create a stir, and they would leave because they weren't getting the reaction they wanted. Other times there was a deliberate need or request or whatnot that the community could address and turn this person with potentially a controversial or negative opinion into a really productive community member. And this was an amazing thing to see. Audrey is amazing, and I encourage everybody listening to this to look up Audrey Tang, who I don't know if she still is, but was a Taiwanese minister of culture for a long, long time, and one of the smartest people you could ever meet.
I love that. That's the plot of Goodwill Hunting, by the way. So I don't know if you stole that or not. No, that is really good. I feel like what I was going to say about the Doge community, I think could benefit from this conversation. Elon, right? I get it. He's God, blah, blah, blah. It's a cult. We love him. But at the same time, he'll go hard on folks. And I don't care that Stephen King has opinions. It doesn't make him a bad writer. Alyssa Milano, I still like Grindhouse, right? She's cute in it too. And I don't care about I don't care about certain opinions. It doesn't make you a bad. Jim Carrey can leave Twitter because of this stuff. I just got done watching The Grinch. I'm still gonna love that movie. I'm still gonna love Sonic 2 with him, and You know, I
Yes,
love every
man.
single thing that Jim Carrey does. Every film that he's in, I love.
With you on that.
And it doesn't stop the minute that he you know spouts an opinion that I may or may not agree with. I think seeing celebrities that way and influencers and people that way, I think is helpful because it's obviously easier to be humble when people are kind, but it's really easy to be prideful when people are unkind. And I have a saying that I love to repeat, which is pride always doubles down. So if you go hard on people and it triggers their pride, 9 times out of 10, they will double down. And that's not the way to get through. At the same time, you don't have to go out and give, like, I'm not going to go give Jim Carrey a hug. I'd love to, if you're listening to this, Jim Carrey. But there's folks, and I'm not going to mention names. There's influencers who have done things. I don't have to go give them a hug, but I also don't have to go hard every single time. Maybe that's my own personal lesson.
Yeah, it's okay to ignore some people, and I think we're probably thinking about some of the same people.
There's a thing in psychology called emotional contagion, and there's a lot of study on this. Where basically, if you're like sad and you interact with someone else, then some of that sadness rubs off on them, and it's the same with anger or happiness or whatever else. And it's so powerful that the person can attempt to hide it, or they can even communicate online through text. And this emotion still has some level of transference between people. So yeah, if someone is angry and you're angry back at them, then it's just going to produce a whole bunch more anger.
There's
So
probably a really good zombie book in that, but then I realized there's always already Snow Crash, so Neil Stevenson got here first, folks.
I think this is where Doge community can be leaders in this space. You know, we're we're kind of fortunate to be like one of the only tight communities that's like right there next to Elon. We're kind of side by side with him, and we can fuel the where free speech goes with hateful content, or we can fuel it with do only good everyday content. And I know that's so cliche and possibly even cringy, but you know, the power's in your
It's like
hands.
to the
We
point you were trying to make. I get it.
You don't always have to be like super optimistic or lovey-dovey or anything like that. It's just about like maybe de-escalating, maybe getting your points across just a bit calmer, bringing it down a notch.
I'm working on it.
I'm trying to. It's hard. Jimmy, I've had Jimmy's been screening all my tweets for 2 years, guys. Y'all can thank
Some
Jimmy.
of them slip past the algo.
This is not a joke. This is real life. Like, there's a lot of things I've wanted to say already out there yet, and there's things that I should say at all. And I can thank that I have friends around me that keep me grounded for the most part, and they try hard.
Well, I'll tell you
Think
guys
about
what. I feel like this is a good spot to play closing time.
Yeah.
I want to give you guys a chance to offer some closing thoughts on the whole conversation that we had. Whatever parts you want to touch on, you're welcome to. I think it's been an awesome discussion. I had a blast. So we got Moonlit. It's at MoonlitMonkey69. Give him a follow. I've always enjoyed long threads with this guy. A very intelligent person. What you got for us?
Man, that is a lot of pressure.
Yep. It better be profound.
Now I'm drawing a blank. We talked about so much. I think where we ended, though, like, how ultimately all this, tension and conflict and problems I have online, can be addressed just by a little bit of internal temperance in our own emotions, and not necessarily like the fluffy, sugar coated kind of stuff that some people might lean to, but just a bit of calm. Yeah, I don't know what else I have to say on that. I mean, we covered regulation, cryptocurrency, the relationship with Litecoin,
Scaling.
scaling.
Yeah, I mean it's all relative to many of the conversations that are happening right now. So that's why I was like, when all the Twitter accounts went down, I was like, Jimmy's like, do we postpone? I'm like, nah, man, this is it. This is timing's good. So,
You're probably gonna give a plug to Chromatic, and I would say, yeah, definitely follow Chromatic as well, because he does have a gift for explaining technical things in a non-technical way, which could get a lot of people insight into how to, how everything works, and the ideas behind it.
Yeah, I wasn't
Yeah,
gonna
I think
plug
that.
him, but now I have to. So it's at chromatic_x, junior developer. Really awesome. It's great to hear your voice for the first time.
Thank
Also,
you.
someone who I love hopping on these threads with. I love when your tweets fly over my head because I know other people are going to jump in and I'm going to learn something every time that you tweet. So I can tell you put a lot of thought into each one. It's not like me where I'm just laying out a deuce and I'm going to throw out a tweet while I'm at it. So, yeah, Chromatic. What do you got for us? Closing thoughts, man.
Closing thoughts. Every new beginning is some older new beginnings. No, that's a song. Closing time. For everybody listening to this, I would say think really hard about what kind of world you want to be, what kind of person you want to be in that world, and take the steps that bring that about. And hopefully that's a wonderful world for everybody. Power's in your hands. Contributions, big, small, whatever. This is a community you can be a part of. You can contribute however you want to. And hopefully it brings you joy. If it stops bringing you joy, think why that is and make steps to bring about joy in the world. And other closing thoughts, Jimmy, Rick, Queen Satoshi, Moonlit, thank you all. I really appreciate this opportunity. It's nice to talk to you all. And thank you everyone for listening. I appreciate that too.
likewise, man. I appreciate you guys more than you know, and hopefully here once my work winds down in the next couple of weeks after the first of the year, I can start jumping into GitHub and learning my way around. So we appreciate you extending that out. So not only to me but to other people because we know you need help.
we would definitely welcome it.
Yep. Well, this is just one of many plugs. Really appreciate having you guys on. Had a blast. And with that, we're going to close it down. I want to also mention this. We did not have a meme of the week this week for the episode, but maybe we'll pick something out and tweet it out instead. So stay tuned. And we've got some new episodes coming up soon. We're going to get more rapid fire on these, and we're super excited. We've got some cool lineups. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And until next time, we'll see you. Bye.
To the moon.
Well.
To the moon.